across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. You already knew that. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you very much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you miss anything of the show at all, you want to go back and see something from last week, why wouldn't you? Don't forget, you can go to my YouTube page. We have cunningly called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You have no excuses for not finding it. You can hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. You don't want to miss anything on this show either. We have a very, very full show coming up. Not only have we got a reshuffle, not just of the Prime Minister's sort of communications team, that was a long time coming. Do you think that's going to really make a difference? Is communication the problem? We shall talk about that and a few moves within his cabinet as well. Plus, we've got the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, once again rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as I was just discussing with JK. She's going to be announcing to the House of Commons, because they're back today as well, nice of them to bother, a tightening of rules for migrants who've been granted asylum about bringing their families to the UK. So she's going to set out criteria. They're going to have tougher English language standards and access to sufficient funds to support themselves. And she's going to outline some reforms to the asylum appeals system. This, my dear, dear, dear Yvette, does not touch the sides of the problem or the sides of the concerns of the British people, which is why they just don't get it, which is why we've seen protests outside so many hotels yet again over the weekend. We're going to be talking to Reform candidate for Epping all about that. She was at one of the protests yesterday where people, young, very small, petite women carrying flags being arrested by the burly policemen. We're also going to be talking about the latest outrageous expose. This in the Sun newspaper. Asylum seekers have been put into new £300,000 townhouses, complete with ensuite bathrooms, electric vehicle charging points and underfloor heating. Do you know how much that costs? For privately owned 3-bed properties have a rental value of £1,200 a month, but they've been leased to Serco, probably at much higher price on behalf of the Home Office to house migrant families rent-free while their applications are processed. But what about all the people who are desperate to get on the housing ladder, who go to work, who were born and bred in this country? And what about all the people who are homeless, mothers with young children who've left domestically abusive relationships and are living in hostels or B&B accommodation? No. The asylum seekers get that accommodation. We are in insane territory. And Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and the Prime Minister think that just slagging off Nigel Farage and reform, along with the Archbishop of York, and we'll talk about all that in a few moments, is going to really hack it with voters. They are in cloud cuckoo land. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Deputy PM, Angela Rayner. I mean, I'm assuming she's still Deputy PM. Haven't seen whether she's being moved in the reshuffle or not. We know she won't be. But she's been accused of hypocrisy once again after telling the tax authorities that her seaside flat in Hove that she just bought for 800 grand was her main residence, saving £40,000 in stamp duty. Previously, her main residence was the one that we had to pay for up in her constituency in Ashton under Lyne. But the Deputy PM has moved her name from the deeds of her house in Greater Manchester before buying the 800 grand property. Now, I'm sure it's all legal, but is it really just hypocritical and a big tax dodge? And by the way, why is her boyfriend, a former Labour MP, working for a lobbying company, which is basically getting contracts from her own department? Well, we'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides, and I want to hear from you as well, particularly about Yvette Cooper announcing these tighter rules for asylum seekers. Keir Starmer accusing Nigel Farage, in his words, of scaremongering over channel migrants. You've got the Archbishop of York, haven't we, accusing Nigel Farage and reform of knee-jerk, short-term solutions to the migrant crisis. Really, it looked like the first long-term solution to me, which is why I cheered it on last week. But what do you make of the little piecemeal announcements from the government, the usual nonsense on a Monday morning press release, and the scale of the issue and the scale of concern? I want to know your reaction to that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with me on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. I'm delighted to say, and I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear, as always, commentator Sam Armstrong joins me once again on a Monday morning. Very good Monday morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Julia.
I don't even know where to start with the madness on migration. Whenever the government makes an announcement, either criticising, the Tories are usually criticising reform on the announcement. And let's face it, reforms policy announcements last week went down very well with a lot of people. That's certainly right. Our audience, and absolutely with me. I have a funny feeling it's going to be where the Tories are going to be in 3 years' time anyway, kicking and screaming. Seems to me absolutely the right decision. Yep, sorry, bye-bye, you're all out. Bye. Done. Nada. We don't want you. The Tories didn't get to grips with this, but Labour, not only are they incapable in terms of competence of getting on top of into grips with this story, they don't even understand how big an issue this is. They think that if they genuinely think tinkering around with how much money or how well someone speaks English who's a relative of a successful asylum seeker is the big concern of the British people today, they're completely out of touch.
Julia, it's literally every single Monday I walk into this studio with you, and when we arrive here there is a press release from the Home Office which is yet another announcement claiming they're just about to solve migration. They've finally come up with this policy. Each and every one is rubbish. Each and every one is not worth the paper we have to unfortunately print them on. And if it keeps carrying on, I will bring into the studio a shredder, and every time that Yvette Cooper sends something through the mail to us, or through email these days, I'm going to run it through that shredder because it's nonsense, it's bunkum, and it is insulting to our audience, it's insulting to the British people, it's insulting to journalists and broadcasters like ourselves who have to discuss it.
Oh no, but the Sky and the BBC, they're being, oh well, this is a very sensible arrangement. It is. Absolutely. Oh no, they probably think it's too right-wing.
It is nonsense after nonsense after nonsense every week, and we have had it now for 25 years of mass migration into this country, and all around us, everywhere we go, we can see on the streets of this country the changes that have been made and change that has come for the worse because of the consequences of mass migration.
They've seen it in Italy, they've seen it in Greece, they've seen it in France, they've seen it in Germany, seen it in Austria, seen it in Sweden, seen it in Denmark, seen it, everywhere else. They've seen it in Ireland, they've seen it in USA. This is not some unique issue to Britain, but one of the points of Brexit, small point worth making, was that we got to decide what our governments did, and they couldn't blame the EU for anything. They are in charge of our borders. It is the #1 job of a government to maintain the borders. Second job, law and order. They're not doing that either, and keeping us safe in particular from people who have no right to be in this country. We've got enough of our own wrong-uns, thank you. We don't need anyone else's. There's some ongoing court cases of allegations involving people who've arrived here as asylum seekers. And again, we don't want to prejudice any trials going on, but that was what sparked a lot of the concerns from local people, whether it's in Epping, whether it's elsewhere. Now, in Nuneaton, in Warwickshire as well. But look, this is the thing. When they talk about these, when they make these announcements, it betrays the fact that they genuinely don't understand the scale of the problem. They don't understand people's concerns. When they talk about, and Labour, and Tories did this as well originally, but Labour in particular about this, when they talk about getting people out of hotels, but then mount a legal case against getting people out of the Epping Hotel, the Bell Hotel in Epping, and we'll talk to a local reform candidate there, Orla, later in the show. But when they talk about that, to move these people into, for instance, 300 grand houses with underfloor heating, no longer available to local people to buy or rent, that betrays that, we're not saying, we just don't want them all in one place. I would argue, actually, I'd rather have them in one place where people knew where they were, rather than, for instance, a 3-bedroom house for a family next door to me or something, suddenly having 10 young men from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, or from wherever, we don't know, they didn't bring their ID with them, living in bedsits next door, and a completely different lifestyle from a family, for instance. Now, I would personally prefer they were in a hotel, but I would rather they weren't anywhere in this country. But if they were going to be somewhere, can they please be in a secure camp somewhere where they can't walk along the street? Now, this is an idea that large parts of our political and media class, me saying that makes me a racist, a bigot, a xenophobe, ignorant, a threat to society. I'm basically, far right for saying all of that. I don't think that is either far right, bigoted, or anything. I don't even think it's a minority view in this country. I think the majority of people in this country, and I think on the left and right now, think this is all insane. But the media and political classes are still living in the cloud cuckoo, Ramona, Blairite era, all of them, thinking that well, if we just don't have it on the front pages, and if that awful Nigel Farage man would stop talking about it, it would all go away. It isn't going to go away until the illegal migrants go away.
Yeah, and do you know what it's not about? It's not about Keir Starmer's number 10 press office and who's running the show for Downing Street Communications. When Peter Mandelson, who actually knew a thing or two, said it's almost never the communications, it's the policy behind it. And we now have a Prime Minister who's had more churn in his top team than Boris. We've got borrowing costs that are higher than they were under Liz Truss, and we've got migration higher than it was under Rishi Sunak. They have taken the worst of dregs of the Tory party's approach to government, combined them all together and delivered it up to the British public, and are expecting us to turn around and be thankful for them.
It's quite a feat, isn't it? Well, let's talk about that reshuffle. I mean, just pop to the loo, go and put some toast on. I mean, we'll do it briefly. I promise you. We're not. I mean, I can see. I've got bank of TV screens, and they're all talking about a load of people which most people never heard of. I've heard of these people. I've met a lot of these people. I'm still not that interested. I'm going to be honest. But there are some interesting things in terms of what's going on in the press office. Now, James Lyons, he's leaving as the Director of Communications, brackets, strategy, close brackets, after just a year. He replaced Matthew Doyle, who left earlier this year. I mean, he cannot... This is a Prime Minister who either cannot keep senior staff, whether it's Chief of Staff, whether it's Director of Communications. He cannot keep people, or they're not up to the job. But one of the people he's bringing in as the government's executive director of communications, working with the existing director of communications. I mean, everyone's got an important job title, haven't they? And I'm sure they're on great big salaries. Is Tim Allen. Now, Tim Allen worked for Tony Blair ahead of getting elected, but he never worked in government. He then went off and made silly sums of money as a lobbyist. All credit to him. But again, is the issue the communication, or is it that your policies are all dire and you don't know what you're doing? In terms of what's happening so far in terms of a reshuffle of his top team, Darren Jones, he was Chief Secretary to Treasury. That's basically number 2 to the Chancellor. He's going to become Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, so working directly for the Prime Minister. James Murray becomes Chief Secretary to the Treasury, taking that old job. Dan Tomlinson becomes Exchequer Secretary to replace... I mean, there's just a bit of a shuffle around. It's a shuffle around of, frankly, some quite nondescript people who most people have never heard of. I don't think any of this is going to pass muster. The people want reshuffled is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. Yeah. I mean, those are the two people. If you look, there's a poll out, was it yesterday? Was it 6 out of 10 people think that Rachel Reeves should be out of a job? I mean, this isn't going to cut the mustard. And this is literally rearranging the rather tediously dull, uninformed, not very charismatic, not very competent deck chairs on the Titanic of this government, and then hoping things are going to turn out different.
There's no doubt the Prime Minister's got a problem with his Chancellor. The public don't trust her, the markets don't trust her, her own backbenchers don't trust her.
And we don't trust her CV.
Well, quite. However, I want to give the Prime Minister a little bit of credit here, which is I don't actually think, in a sense, much of this is his fault. Every single Tory, and I'll say this why, every single Tory minister, Prime Minister, number 10 special advisor I speak to says exactly the same thing, which is the entire British state doesn't do what Prime Ministers want.
This is true.
They all come into government and they think all of a sudden they're in power, and then they realise that the civil service aren't doing it, nothing is working.
The civil service is sort of on side with a lot of things Labour wants to do. Yeah, ramp up the welfare state, give asylum to everyone in the whole world.
But they don't want to do the absolutely massive things that needs to be changed. And Keir Starmer...
Neither does Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer is the great kind of saint figure of this dying system of the way the British government has been run for 30, 40 years. And I really do think that this reshuffle today is the death rattle of a broken system of government. And we see in the Times today that Jack Straw, former Labour Home Secretary, coming out and saying, look, I actually think we could leave the ECHR. We're seeing Lord Blunkett saying the same things. Increasingly,
Jack Straw will talk about temporarily, suspending it.
Increasingly, we are seeing the fact that everybody, left, right, the elite, are waking up to the fact that the way that this country is governed hasn't worked. The British public won't wear it, and if they want to cling on to power, as I believe they do desperately, they don't want to let Nigel Farage into Downing Street. They're going to have to change something.
I just
quickly.
don't. I think they have neither the ability nor the will to actually do what is necessary, which is why I offered my services last week to Nigel Farage. And on a non-party, I will not be a member of any political party. There's no political party I can fully sign up to, although there are political parties I have more in common with, rather obviously, than others. I don't see the Greens asking for my services anytime soon. But at the end of the day, I just don't think they are competent. I think one of the fascinating things about this new Labour government, it's still relatively new, a year and a bit, is how surprised they were by how hard it is to govern. Yeah. And, you have to make nasty choices and you're going to upset people and someone's not going to like it on either the left or the right. And they are facing the challenge from reform in a lot of their red wall seats. They're facing there's a sort of challenge in the Tories. There are a lot of people who might go, oh, this lot are even worse than the Tories, I'll go back to the Tories. But also, hilariously, this challenge from Jeremy Corbyn's new party, the Your Party, what the hell he's calling it this week. And also, hilarious. I'm sorry, I love this revelation at the weekend. Pretty obvious, really, that by reducing the voting age to 16, that a lot of those 16 and 17-year-olds, the party they're most likely to vote for, Jeremy Corbyn's party. So Labour are they are absolutely being squeezed between a rock and a hard place. But I think they are emotionally, intellectually and practically philosophically incapable of doing what is necessary to be done, because fundamentally they don't think the system is broken. They want to pretend to put a plaster on what they're going to pretend is the problem, like loads of these people are coming over in boats and they're getting asylum, and then they're bringing over 12 members of their family, but if only they brought over 6 members of their family and they all spoke better English, then that would be fine and the British people wouldn't have a problem with it. They don't get it. And you can't solve a problem if you don't understand what the problem is. This is like getting in a plumber who thinks the problem is your dripping tap as opposed to, the water that's pouring out of a pipe underneath. And he's going, let me just change the washer in that tap, all sorted. And the rest of the country's going, there's water all over the floor from the big burst pipe down there. They don't see the burst pipe. And anyone pointing out the burst pipe is a bigot.
In fact, I think it even goes worse than that. And there's one thing that worries me more than anything at the moment, which is this country has never felt more fragile, more febrile, more devoid of trust in every institution, the police, our government and everything. Yeah. And we stand on the precipice, I fear, and every smart person in the city I speak to says exactly the same. We stand on the precipice of a massive economic shock in the next couple of years. Government, it's costing the government, it's technical, but it costs the government so much more to borrow than it's ever had before. There is no money left.
It doesn't cost the government, it costs us.
The Labour Party have made clear they're not prepared to cut welfare. They can't cut defence. We need to spend more on defence, not less. They're not prepared to cut just about anything. Yeah. They've already squeezed the farmers. They've done everything possible. We're going to have massive tax rises, all of which is going to have the effect of sending this economy into a downward spiral. And we know that when that kind of event happens, that all of the pressures on society get higher and higher and higher and higher. And this time, I can genuinely see this country bursting in the next year or so, in which a massive totemic crash of public support for the institutions that make up this society.
I know an awful lot of people who I would consider to be really very moderate people in terms of their views from a range of different political parties, who are now at the point where not only do they expect there to be some level of mass protest rioting on the streets, they would welcome it. I know a number of people who've said to me, I think that's what the country needs. Now, I don't think it is what the country needs. I would like our governments and opposition, everyone, to tackle the issues. It's not us. It's not what we do in this country. We didn't riot when they tried to stop Brexit from happening. We're not French, exactly. No, but it's true. But I really do think that there are a lot of people saying maybe that's going to be the wake-up call. But I mean, I think it'll just lead to a load of people who write things on Facebook getting imprisoned, as opposed to the government recognising it. And I think, seriously, put your flags up, wear your flag with pride, protest peacefully outside any migrant hotel or any government office or MP's office that you want. I complete, as long as it's peaceful, non-threatening, but don't give them an inch. Do not let them say that you're a yob or you're dangerous or give them any excuse for these sort of crackdowns. We've got to be better than them. We've got to be better than them and rise above that. Talking of being better than them, can we talk about Greta? Greta's got off to Gaza again. Good God. There was the most extraordinary coverage in, was it Barcelona, when they set off. A bunch of preening people. I mean, They're literally the ghastliest people on the planet. I mean, I'm pondering, would I rather be in a room with people from Hamas or from the flotilla from Gaza, to Gaza, and it's touch and go, but I would really love that flotilla to be delivered directly to Gaza. The Israelis have said this time round, instead of just getting them in their waters, again, dispute over was it international or not international waters, and just sort of, deporting them, they might actually put them in quite a serious prison, along with terrorists and serious criminals. Is that a good idea? Is that yet another propaganda fail, PR fail on the part of Israel?
Well, look, there's part of me that says, do you know what? That's exactly what she wants. Greta says that she's mates with all this Hamas lot. Let's see how she does on a wing of grown Hamas terrorists for a couple of weeks.
Bearing in mind, they'll all know, oh no, this woman helps us. They'll despise her. I mean, they'll utterly despise her. She wears T-shirts and things like that. She doesn't cover herself
Julia,
up.
These people will have no idea who she is, right? This isn't for them. It's not for the Palestinian people. This is all about Greta. Greta Thunberg knows precisely as much about Gaza as she did about the climate.
Yeah, I know.
Zip, zilch, zero. This is a professional protester that has got rich, that has built herself an international media career by travelling around the world doing one thing: supporting causes that hate the Western world.
The latest fashionable cause.
But they all have this in common, Julia.
Yeah.
She's supporting terrorist organisations that want to destroy the West.
Well, she had a T-shirt on saying, we are all Palestine Action. Palestine Action is a prescribed terror organisation in this country.
But she also supports climate change efforts that would destroy the Western economy, that would place all of these countries in the lead. This is someone whose prime motivating fear is a hatred of her own country and the alliances that it has formed.
I'm put it this way. Putin, Xi Jinping and the mullahs in Iran and the terrorists, well, what's left of the terrorist leaders in Hamas, they're all on on Greta's side. I'm thinking maybe you might not be the goodie, maybe you might be the baddie in this scenario.
Why do we think that Putin has been proved again and again to fund the environmental movement?
Yep.
This is exactly what he wants. We are playing into our enemies, and those on the other mainstream news channels that buy the bunkum that she comes out with are...
But also, again and again, all it keeps being asked, about October the 7th, she just will not condemn what happened on October the 7th. How easy is it for anyone to condemn what happened on October the 7th, and how easy it is for anyone to say Hamas is a terrorist group who need to return the hostages? No, she still thinks they're a resistance group. If you think they're a resistance group rather than terrorists, you're on the wrong side of history, sweetheart. And have a lovely, lovely boat trip, and I'm sure it'll all go terribly, terribly well. And I'm sure the poor, long-suffering folk of Gaza will be so, so grateful for everything you've done for them with those 2 packets of rice that you turn up with. But there we are, 10:25 is time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. But in particular, I do want to know your thoughts on, the great and the good, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Archbishop of York, acting head of the Church of England, all of their criticisms of where we are, people's protests, Nigel Farage and Reform's policies on migrants, and whether or not the Home Secretary's plan to have tighter rules for asylum seekers bringing in their family members is really, really, really getting to the nitty-gritty of our actual concerns. And why on earth don't they, let's face it, get it? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. If you can answer that question, I would be so, so grateful. This is Talk.
think calling her Big Ange is actually less insulting than you calling her a grandmother. Quite clearly, she is not. Maybe she's technically a grandmother.
I'm a grandfather.
I think it's demeaning to her and her status to call her a grandmother. She is a deputy prime minister, and she certainly doesn't look like a granny to me. So can we agree that is? I think that's a bit sexist, actually, Jeremy.
You're joking.
Just gonna come out with that.
Okay. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:29 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. I want to hear your thoughts on, well, what on earth's going on? That's going to be my question from now. What on earth's going on? Laura James is in Hampshire. Laura James, good morning to you.
How are you after your holiday?
Well, I've been back for a week, to be fair.
I know. I'm just ringing up about the churchman.
The Archbishop's comments. He said that Nigel Farage's policy was knee-jerk, short-term, didn't he?
Yes. No, I don't believe there should be churchmen in the House of Lords. I don't think they should be making pronouncements at all. I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic, so I go to church, but I do believe that it should be in the pulpit and it shouldn't be in the House of Lords. I think that it dates back to Henry VIII, where the Archbishop of York was always at his elbow saying, yes, Your Majesty, you can have a new wife, don't worry, Your Majesty.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. I don't think there's any place for people, just because of that job, that you should be making laws, unless we're going to have a specific... I'm an atheist. Specific people who represent atheists doing that. But the main thing about this is a guy, as far as I can know, you know, he's been in the church most of his adult life. He did a media studies degree at Poly, and apparently he's now the expert on immigration and immigration policy, and he thinks it's his job to talk about, I mean, not just that, but also the two-child benefit cap and things. He's just very busy spending other people's money, isn't he?
And there's plenty of land that they could be building, or indeed empty church houses.
Yes.
If they want to put up refugees, they can. But the other point I want to make, and I will say, there's a conspiracy warning flag here. I do believe the judges are all in the Labour government pocket. Proof was the appeal judge who used to be the head of the Fabian Society. I knew... Can I just say, for people who don't know, this is the decision last week, I think, was it Thursday after I was on air, from the judge... Friday, from the judge on the Epping Forest, the Bell Hotel, on whether or not, you know, the challenge from the government and the hotel, where they could actually keep migrants there. Here's the thing, though. The judge who said that they could no longer have that, he apparently stood as a Tory candidate. Isn't the point that... Let's stop pretending that judges are neutral and that they don't bring their personal politics with them. Of course they do. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. I'm afraid I did know that it was going to go that way, and I don't trust them. I certainly don't trust the leaders in the police, the judges, all of that. I think they're you know, and I know that's a conspiracy theory, but no,
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think it is fair to say, and I think I know for a fact, 'cause I've got a friend who's a judge, that you know, you can't become a judge now. You can't get through a lot of these processes. You certainly can't become a senior police officer unless you sign up to a whole load of woke views, and these are among them. Really appreciate that, Laura Jane. Thank you so much for getting in touch. Sandy is on the line in Suffolk. Sandy, hello. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia. I wanted to speak to you about the inappropriate location of these new houses that are being given to the migrants.
These are the £300,000 a year, £300,000 houses for
Yeah. They were on the market for quite a while and weren't sold because the location is just so remote. It's this sort of idyllic, bucolic English scene of this green common land with ponies roaming free.
I'm surprised they got planning permission for them.
Yeah, a little village pub and absolutely nothing else. The nearest town, what you would have to get in a car to go to, which is called which is a few little shops like antique shops, arts and crafts shops, a castle, the most beautiful Tudor buildings. And I can't see how most people, let alone immigrants, would fit in there. You wouldn't fit in there. It's not
I don't. Yeah, I'm a city girl, but lots of people you described there. A lot of people go, "Oh, that's my ideal. That'd be the most wonderful place to move to have my family." The key thing is, any housing. We know people are desperate to buy housing, to rent housing, especially family housing. Somewhat, a house with a garden instead of a small flat above a railway line, which is where half the people are now being housed in London. I mean, but giving these houses to rent to asylum seekers is it's mad.
Yeah. When the biggest town is this, which is probably a 20-minute drive away. Now that is the town that's got a migrant hotel as well.
Yeah.
And that's in an inappropriate
Here's the thing,
location.
is the solution, that's the thing, because I think a lot of people don't want them in hotels, but it's fair for people to ask, okay, if they're not in hotels, they're going to be in local communities. But is this, I suppose you're going to think the same as me, is we don't want them in the general public, we want them away somewhere else.
I'm not being a NIMBY because I regard the whole of the UK as my backyard, and I don't want them anywhere in my backyard. And my backyard is the wider area of England, Wales, Scotland. They aren't wanted here, while we can't provide adequate and proper services for our own people.
Nailed it. Could you please explain this to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, Sandy, because they clearly don't get it. So appreciate it. Cool. Again, voice of common sense. It's not just us on the air. It's your calls as well. Do give us a call. Have your say. 0344 499 1000 is the number. 10:35 is the time. Up next, going to talk to Conservative peer Lord Mckinley. Always talks a whole load of sense. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk. In just a couple of moments, going to talk to the Conservative peer, Lord Mckinley. Sam Armstrong, it's really interesting what Sandy just said in particular. Just like, I'm not a NIMBY, not in my backyard. I don't want these people, not in my local area, my local hotel, in my street, local house of multiple occupancy. I don't want them in this country at all. This is the bit that Labour and the Lib Dems and Greens and quite a lot of the Tory party that you work with don't get, isn't it? The people don't want them here at all?
Yeah, look, the only appropriate location for a illegal migrant is outside of this country. But
it's in their own country.
One thing that really gets my goat, actually, is this desire that we can just fill up northern terrace streets, turn them all into HMOs, and just dump migrants on there. And that, by the way, is government policy right now.
And I don't even want an HMO next to my home full of let's face the bigots, full of white Brits. I don't want 20 young white men who've been born in this country and go back centuries in their heritage in this country, living next door to me in a family home, because they're not going to be living the same life. There's going to be music at all hours. There's going to be different behaviour.
It's not just about security, right? Those streets were the same streets that you go back, you look at VE Day, the coronation, there was a whole community there that came out, did street parties in which everybody, families, young, old, everyone came together, celebrated something. That community, that shared experience, that culture, that British English culture we had, is every bit as worthy of protection as public safety. And people shouldn't be afraid to say, actually, one of the reasons why they don't want entire neighbourhoods turning over to people who've just broken into the country illegally is because we lose that sense, that space, that shared culture and heritage.
But even just down to being able to chat to people at the school gates, being recognising what the signs say on the local shops, on one of the high streets near me. I mean, I could be in any Middle Eastern country walking down that road, and it just sort of think, but I'm not in the Middle East. I'm in Britain. It doesn't. I'm sorry, it's just not what people signed up to. Again, multiculturalism is the issue, not multiracialism. People, if you want to come here, then you sign up to British culture. If you don't want to come here long term, sign up to British culture, then don't come here. It's really, really that simple. Well, let's talk about this with Lord Mckinley. He's a Conservative peer. Was Craig Mckinley? He was a Tory MP. Unfortunately, we've got some problems with visuals, but we got a picture of you, at least for those who are watching. But we can certainly hear you. Lord Mckinley, a very good morning. I think we can hear you. Lord Mckinley, can we hear you? Oh, no. Are you on mute? If you can hear me, Lord Mckinley? We can't. Hello?
Hello, yeah, I've got some technical problems, sorry.
Oh, what a shame. Well, we'll persevere and hopefully we can at least hear what you've got to say. Just first of all, just want to hear your thoughts on the biggest topic of the day, I think, today, which, contrary to some of the news broadcasters, I don't think is the earthquake in Afghanistan today. The Home Secretary is going to announce today, first day back, the House of Commons after the summer recess, tightening of rules for migrants granted asylum seeker status to bring their families to the UK. They've got to have a bit more money. They've got to be able to speak English. And Keir Starmer accusing Nigel Farage of scaremongering, and the Archbishop of York chiming in yesterday, criticising reform for what he called knee-jerk policies. Do any of these people get how the British people are actually feeling right now?
Well, much as I've got every sympathy and respect, actually, for senior members of the Church of England, it always seems that they're just out of kilter with the real world, and I'm afraid to say the Archbishop of York is one of these. Now, it wasn't until I was reading some reports over the weekend that I realised this ridiculous situation, that if you are a refugee that's just been given status, you can bring your family over immediately and you will be given priority accommodation.
Brilliant.
So let me give you this situation. So, you've got a Syrian refugee has paid his $3,000 or whatever it is to come across on a boat, and he's been in a 4-star hotel for a year and finally gets status. So he can then bring his wife and family over.
Oh no, not just his wife and kids.
I'm being kind. Okay, you can bring
parents, brothers, sisters, their families,
and you will be at the top of a local housing list. But should you be a Brit with a British passport and you have a Syrian wife, you are not allowed to do the same. I mean, it makes no sense.
Yep.
It seems that I know I try and avoid two-tier, but we've got almost two-tier status of living in the UK if you've got a British.
Yeah, I've spoken to loads of people who say they've fallen in love with someone, they're a Canadian, an American, or a French person, and they're not able to bring those people, their other halves here.
In my surgeries when I was an MP, you had Brits with, as you say, an Australian or a New Zealand or a particularly, I don't know, US citizen seems to have a big problem.
Yeah,
and people have been married for years and they've got their wife has suddenly had problems with their immigration status after 10 years.
Yeah.
and all this going on. So yes, it is very bizarre, and it's one of those things that you don't really know until the surface.
Well, this is the thing. It seems to me, and we've got this sort of mini reshuffle going on with Dr. Keir Starmer in his government, but also his top communications team, and he's bringing in some people like Tim Allen, who did communications for Tony Blair. But we're talking about a head of 97. I mean, long time back, but it's been senior figure in lobbying and advising top level people in many years. He's a highly talented guy, knows his stuff, but is communication the issue? Because it seems to me that this government, and to a certain extent the Tory government, of which you were an MP for, that they think that the problem is, A, we know about all of this. Nigel Farage keeps talking about all of this, and it's on the TV screens. And if everyone could just shut up about this, and we could maybe get the people out of hotels so there's not a focus, just put them in loads of different houses of multiple occupancy and hostels and no one really knows about it, then this whole problem would go away. But that suggests to me they don't get it. We don't want the knowing about it to go away. We want the actual fact of it to go away.
Yeah, I feel there's something different going on now, Julia. I mean, we've always been a little annoyed about the level of refugees, whether they're genuine ones or not. I think all of us knew that many of them were not genuine. And then you get the so-called refugee charities say, but 80% get approved at the end of the day. Well, I think there's something wrong with our legal system that allows an 80% approval.
And also, they don't get approved necessarily, they get leave to stay because there's no chance of getting rid of them. So it's not the same as actual asylum status. And most of them have actually been rejected in other countries in Europe.
Well, that's already what I'm saying. The rejection across most of Europe, about 40 or 50% get approved. So where our 80% comes from, heaven only knows. I know we've been talking this morning about the state of our judges and legal system, which seems to be on a different planet from everyone else. I mean, I've always been very confused that on matters of ECHR, France and Germany and Spain and all the rest of the countries, Denmark, which is actually a bit of a left-leaning government, they're being infinitely tougher within the same strictures of the ECHR than we seem capable of.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the question. I mean, I'm very interested to see old Labour grandees like Jack Straw coming out today, actually sort of questioning in a similar basis that even I would, to say, well, this thing has morphed into something that was not meant to morph into. So if that is the problem, we need to do something about it. I have no doubt whatsoever we must leave the ECHR because it has morphed into an animal that does not do what it should do.
And do you think your party is going to get there?
Do I think my party will get there? Well, there is going to be a platform announcement, I believe, by Kemi at conference. I don't think there's any prizes for guessing which way that's going to.
Just finally, I want to ask you about the Archbishop of York, though, Stephen Cottrell. He's the acting head of the Church of England. He's just basically exactly the same, frankly, as the last few real heads of the Church of England, criticising, well, not just politicians, but pretty much anybody who has, that's what he's doing, really, anybody who doesn't have a complete wokist view of the world, saying that Reform's policy announcement on dealing with migration was knee-jerk and was short term. It seems to me it was like the first policy that wasn't short term, one in, one out and things like that. That's short term. Saying you come here, you're going to be out, end of, nothing to discuss. Mass deportations of legal migrants. That's about as long term as you can get, isn't it?
Well, I'd say it's very, very clear. And I think we do need some clarity on this whole issue of migration. But it's quite bizarre, isn't it? The previous incumbent of the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think he did say that he'd be taking a load of migrants in to sort of live with him because he's so nice. I don't think he ever did it.
But as a general rule, should the head of the Church of England...
Archbishop of York's going to do it either.
Well, should the head of the Church of England, acting or not, be putting their little tuppence worth into politics? And he's also talking about how we need to end the two-child benefit gap because of poverty. I mean, what those people with more than 2 children could do is get a job and actually pay for their own kids. That would deal with the poverty issue, wouldn't it? Well, but I mean, they keep putting their noses into policies which the British public feel pretty strongly about.
No, you're absolutely right. They're sort of out of kilter with the British public. It's very rich from me, an unelected Conservative peer, to put my nose into politics. But
you're in the upper house of the political chamber that makes decisions.
I am, but it does seem that senior clergy do seem to want to get involved with politics. I perhaps suggest they take the cassock off and put their name on a ballot paper and see how they get on.
Lord Mckinley, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate that. It's Conservative Lord Mckinley. Sam Armstrong, do you agree?
I do. I just think, why is it with the church that every single time they express a political opinion, every time they vote against the government, it is in one direction? And look, couldn't the church just do something I haven't known it do for a while, which is to talk about
they could mention God and faith and forgiveness and all of the things that the established church in this country is meant to do. I actually think it would be a really helpful presence. And if they did that, maybe more people might want to go to church, because they are hemorrhaging people. I mean, maybe they want lots of migrants to arrive. They think more of them are going to turn up in the pews. But curiously enough, young people actually are going back to church. It's just not, they're not going back to the Church of England church. It's not the sorts of churches that Archbishop Cottrell is running. Yeah. They're going back for something real, tangible. He is so yesterday's man, and I just but worry again, that it's the establishment classes that's totally out of touch with the rest of us are. 10:48's time. We're going to take a break. We're going to find out whether my next guest, who's a Labour councillor, is out of touch, because he doesn't really see what Angela Rayner could possibly have done wrong buying her extra home at 800 grand in Hove. Is she on a chicken run to get a new safer seat? And has she managed to dodge inheritance tax by declaring that this is now her main home? This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
And in a sense, because the Home Office won't adopt Reform's excellent detain and deportation plan and detain people in remote detention centres away from residents, that's what they should do. If they do that, then you can remove people immediately from the hotels. But because they won't do that, they're left with no choice but to leave the hotels full. And this is a government that has pretended they want to empty the hotels and then instructs expensive lawyers and barristers to say, no, we want to keep the hotels full, please.
I think calling her Big Ange is actually less insulting than you calling her a grandmother. Quite clearly, she is not. Maybe she's technically a grandmother.
I'm a grandfather.
I think it's demeaning to her and her status to call her a grandmother. She is a deputy prime minister, and she certainly doesn't look like a granny to me. So can we agree that is? I think that's a bit sexist, actually, Jeremy.
You're joking.
Just gonna come out with that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. Not, as far as I can tell, already reshuffled in Keir Starmer's little mini reshuffle going on this morning. there seem to be some question marks over Angela Rayner's various... Well, we're told it's a property empire. It's not. She gets a grace and favour apartment in Westminster, doesn't have to pay for, but she also has her home in Ashton-under-Lyne, her constituency. But now she's just bought this place, nice little flat on the seaside front in Hove, near Brighton, for about 800 grand. But interestingly, it's a remarkable coincidence that the property owned by her former husband and herself was valued at £650,000, the maximum amount allowed before the inheritance tax becomes payable, before she placed that in a trust using a wealth protection firm, and then designated her new flat in Hove in East Sussex as her main home, managed to avoid £40,000 in stamp duty as a result. She's denied doing anything wrong. She hasn't broken any laws, certainly, but is she a hypocrite for dodging the sort of taxes that she would certainly attack a Tory MP or minister for doing? Well, let's talk to a Labour councillor in Waltham for us, Sebastian Salek, about this. Very good morning to you, Sebastian.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you for joining us. Well, I'm doing very well, but I don't have a property empire or even a second property. I think people might be overplaying this a bit, and there's no doubt at all the Deputy Prime Minister faces a lot of scrutiny. But at the end of the day, she's Miss sort of, woman of the people, and yet there's some big question marks about her whole council house way back when, from Lord Ashcroft's book. And now she seems to be avoiding all of the taxes that she says well-off people should pay and supports when they're for other people. But she manages, perfectly legally, I accept, to avoid those taxes herself on her own properties. Is she yet another hypocrite?
Well, all credit to you, Julia, for rubbishing the idea that Angela Rayner is sitting on some kind of property empire. By my count, she owns one property, which is the most that the most of us own. I just don't see the hypocrisy here. Let's think about the definition of hypocrisy. It's when you say one thing and you do the opposite.
So that's why she's a hypocrite.
I can't see the thing that
she's in favour of everyone facing more taxes. You're better off. I would say someone on a six-figure salary is definitely among the better off. Those are the sort of people who you would expect to be paying more tax. And the wealth property-owning classes, if you are avoiding inheritance tax, a tax which, they're talking about, putting that up at the budget possibly, if you're avoiding things like 40 grand in stamp duty, which everyone else has to pay, only because of identity of your job, you are a hypocrite. How can you be anything but?
But let's be clear, she's only paying the tax that she is due to pay. It would be, frankly, rather strange if she volunteered to pay extra tax. I don't know any of us who would volunteer to pay extra tax. She owns one home, which is the one in Hove. She is paid the necessary stamp duty on that, and she's also paying the extra council tax on that, which was the law that she brought in. So she's playing by the rules that she herself has set.
Yeah, but the extra council tax will be, what, a couple of grand at best. It's not the same as 40 grand or avoiding inheritance tax. Now, there's a lot of talk about, she's got 3 children, she got divorced from her husband, and, there'll be things going on there. But at the end of the day, this is about legally avoiding tax. Exactly the sort of thing that she would have happily criticised any politician for. She was very big on criticising Rishi Sunak's wife for her non-dom status. Perfectly legal. By the way, I criticised Rishi Sunak's wife for her non-dom status as well. Thought it was outrageous, but it was perfectly legal. She thought it was something worth talking about. She criticised him publicly and criticised her publicly. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that Labour has put its money where its mouth is on non-doms, and it has drastically reduced the rights that non-doms have in this country. I think a lot of this comes down to, and I'm sorry to say it, it's sexism and it's classism.
It's
we have
sexism?
Well, yeah.
How is it sexism? Just because you criticise a woman doesn't mean it's sexist.
No, you're completely right about that. But think about what she's been criticised for in the past. It's going to Ibiza. It's having a vape on the beach.
I've never criticised her for those things.
I'm not saying that you have, but I'm talking broadly about the kind of criticism that Angela Rayner gets. And I think she has a harder time than other politicians.
No, because she's in the news more because she's a very flamboyant, colourful character. And frankly, this bunch of complete sort of, they look like accountants, but sadly not that competent. She stands out. Everyone knows who she is. That's why she gets a lot of focus. But she's not being criticised because she's a woman. She's being criticised because she's a hypocrite.
Well, the fact remains that there is no clear hypocrisy here. I'm still waiting to hear what it is.
I've just told you.
Go on, tell me again.
She is part of a whole, not just the Labour Party, but her side of the Labour Party, who desperately thinks that rich people should pay, quote, their fair share of tax. Well, she is one of the rich people. She has a 6-figure salary. She can afford to buy a second home that isn't related to her work. That is kind of most people's definition of well-off. And she is dodging taxes that other people have to pay.
But she is not dodging taxes. Any of us could do what Angela Rayner has done. There is no exotic transaction going on here. It's completely normal. She only owns one home.
But the only reason that is because she gets a free grace and favour apartment, which the rest of the taxpayer pays for because of her position as Deputy Prime Minister, and we don't, and therefore she doesn't pay for that. But most of us don't have a job where we get to own 2 homes or have 2 properties, and we're able to designate one or the other as her main home. And as we know, you've seen MPs across the board for years have been doing this flipping around between, this is my second home when it comes to having it refurbished and furnished, but when it comes to tax or selling it, it's suddenly my main home, so I can avoid capital gains tax. I think most of my audience and most taxpayers, most voters, thankfully think, a plague on all of these people for doing it. But she's someone who's criticised people for doing things like that, and she's just done it herself.
So what has she criticised people for doing specifically?
She's criticised people. She's criticised Tories for dodging tax.
But she hasn't dodged tax.
She hasn't evaded tax, but she has dodged tax. And no, this isn't the same as buying some duty-free fags.
No, but she hasn't dodged tax. She only owns one home, so there's only single stamp duty to pay on it. It would be completely crazy if she were to pay second home levels of stamp duty on the only home she owns.
She just happened to buy it. She just happened to buy it at the time when she just put her own home in Ashton-under-Lyme in trust. Come on, it doesn't add up. You know it doesn't add up.
There's no particular privilege that she has as Deputy Prime Minister that gives us that access.
Well, there is. She gets a free home that we all pay for in Westminster. I don't have one of those, and I work near Westminster. Right, I'm going to have to leave. You can hear the music. Sebastian, I'd love to get you on again, though, defending her. Sebastian Sellett, a Labour councillor in Waltham Forest. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call, 0244 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is lovely, as always, to have your company. I know, busy week, a lot of people heading back to work, a lot of people, you know, kids starting school either this week or some as early as today. Good luck with all of that. Oh, apparently you're all going to get a lot more help with your childcare if you've got kids under the age of 4, but of course, still not actually covering the full cost of the actual fees at the nursery, so not as much use as you think. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and plenty more besides. But so don't forget, if you do miss anything on the show, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about, well, let's face it, the only story in town these days, and the number one issue for voters, and that, of course, is illegal migration. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is announcing the Commons today as MPs come back to the Commons after their summer recess. A tightening of rules for migrants granted asylum on bringing their families to the UK. Basically, they're going to have tougher English language standards and access to sufficient funds to fund themselves. She's also going to outline some reforms to the asylum appeals system. I think you'll agree with me. This does not touch the sides of the issues that we actually care about right now. This is not about a few extra family members coming in and whether or not they speak good English or not. This is about the very, very, very simple matter of we don't want these people here in the first place. We definitely don't want them in hotels. We've seen yet more of those protests outside asylum hotels around the country, including in Epping. And we're going to be talking to the Reform candidate there. And that is Orla Minahan, about some of the arrests, particularly of women holding flags at the hotel, Bell Hotel, of course, the subject of that Court of Appeal judgment last week. Also going to talk about those asylum seekers who've been put in new £300,000 a year houses, complete with underfloor heating, by the way, privately owned 3-bed properties, a rental value of £1,200 a month, and they've been leased to Serco, paid for by you and me, for migrant families to live in rent-free. Yeah, seems reasonable, doesn't it? Meanwhile, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, still the Education Secretary, some have talked about she might be one of the people who might be facing the chop in the Prime Minister's reshuffle going on right now. She has stood by the move to keep the Bell Hotel in Epping open, and she insisted that the Home Office was right to argue in the court case last Friday that the rights of asylum seekers do trump those of local residents. Quite extraordinary. Also, Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Dice has hit back at the acting head of the Church of England, that's Stephen Cottrell, after Cottrell branded Reform UK's deportation policies as an isolationist, short-term, knee-jerk approach with no long-term solutions. Well, Richard Tice is actually right now on stage along with the head of Doge for Reform UK, Zia Youssef, holding a press conference in Westminster right now. We'll bring you the latest on whatever they're announcing as soon as we get it. Delighted to say joining me today is commentator Sam Armstrong, still with us for the whole show. A morning once again to you.
Good morning.
And we're asking you to get in touch. As always, you get to decide what you want to call about, anything and everything we are talking about, but also in particular what the Home Secretary is announcing today. It just shows, you know, I want people to have a bit of slightly better English and maybe have a few more quid in their pocket before they're allowed to come here as a family member of someone who's come here illegally and been granted asylum. As if that is really the issue. We're talking about, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This is, fiddling while Rome burns. They really, really don't get it. And as such as they do get it, they think the people who are angry about all these issues, whether it's the hotels, whether it's the hostels, whether it's the houses brought up, whether it's the cost, whether it's the cultural impact, whether it's all of that, they just think we're all horrible bigots. It's as simple as that. And if Nigel Farage could just shut up and go away and stop putting his camera and the media stop talking about these people arriving on the beaches of Dover, then it would all go away and no one would care. So it's all our fault, really. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged to the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Sam Armstrong, this is the fundamental issue to me. And you've talked so many, it's literally the regular on a Monday. Bring your shredder in, because we're just going to shred the latest insanely inadequate and useless, meaningless policy announcement from the government, usually from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, who's been a busy old lass over the summer, has to be said. But the main issue with this government, even worse than the lot you lot represent, the Tories, they don't get it. They're not going to solve the problem that we are facing with illegal migration, or indeed overstaying visas and things as well, because they don't actually, in their hearts, think it's a problem.
They don't see what we see, which is a country that increasingly feels everywhere you look broken.
Why don't they see it?
I think it's in part ideology. I think it's in part the fact that they thought when they were in charge things would be different. I think it's in part that they live cushy, comfortable, relaxed lives. I think it's in part that the fact that diversity seems a little bit different when you're in Islington.
Well, there's a lovely delicatessen at the end of the road. Honestly, that's what they think.
Ottolenghi is their idea of what multiculturalism means. Well, let me tell you, it feels...
Very complicated recipes.
It feels a little bit different when you're in a working class community that has had the raw end of just about every deal going in this country for a very long time. And on top of all of that, what you see is your high street emptied out. And what comes in? Turkish barbers that'll only take cash. Why is that? What you see is people getting moved into the house next door, a house that you have to work hard to pay for, and they're doing just fine. What you see is people swinging the lead. One of the 1.2 billion quid a year that we spend on benefits for foreigners. When you see this again and again and again, you begin to see what we all see, which is that this country isn't fair. It is not fair
that's
for
the thing.
the people
but crucially, when you see it and then you're told, no, you're wrong. You don't see it. It's not true. That's what we've been told for 20 years. And if you're claiming you do see it, you're a bigot. And now everyone's going, look, here are the stats. Here are the stats on the number of people. Here's the stats on what they cost. Here's the stats on where they are. Here are the stats on criminality and alleged criminality of these people. Here are the stats on their chances of ever being removed. Here are the stats. And then we're still being told we're wrong for thinking what we're thinking based on the facts.
I do kind of feel sorry for Keir. I can't believe I'm saying this. I kind of feel sorry for Keir Starmer because...
What?
But this hot potato of ignoring the public has been tossed around the political classes, handed around from one to the other for 30 years. We've had 30 years there or thereabouts of mass migration, and this is just the latest generation to come in. And Keir Starmer has arrived, and all of a sudden it is coming at a moment in which there is a massive totemic public awakening that is going to change everything, and he is going to be turfed out of office in one way or another at the end of this.
Well, they're playing Pass the Parcel, and the music stopped, and unfortunately for him, he was the one holding the parcel.
As a result, he will go down in history as one of the worst full-stop prime ministers that this country has
I have a feeling that would have happened anyway. I think he's so woefully inadequate. He's such an also-ran sort of... Nothing wrong with getting a C grader, but don't big yourself up as an A-pluser if you're a C grader like he is. He's a plodding... He's a plodding overachiever in terms of he's managed to get himself promoted again and again, but he's trying to be all things to all men. He's actually not. He's not a quick thinker. He's not a doer. He's never done anything of any. He's just massively over promoted, and he's just being exposed to someone who simply can't hack it. He can't think on his feet. But as you say, this has been going on for a very, very, very long time. Now I've been writing about this and talking about this for a very long time. I remember I was political editor on the Sunday Express. 2000 was. I remember writing columns on multiculturalism, on the rise of the Muslim population in this country. There were lots of issues of burqa and things like that at the time. I've been talking about the issue of mass uncontrolled immigration and illegal immigration for many, many years. I've been called every name under the sun. I mean, literally washes over me. I don't care. I know I'm on the right side of history. I also know what's in my heart. I know I'm not a bigot. I wasn't raised as a racist or a bigot, and it's just like, you're not going to make me question my morals and my conscience. I know what they are. But I always felt it was something that I should speak out on, because you need some people who are a little bit braver on this. There are quite a lot of Johnny-come-latelys. This I'm great. People are finally coming around to this, but these things have been brewing for a long time, and I still think, and I've mentioned this on the show before, one of the reasons I got to this quite early for someone from the North London establishment, class in that sense, is because I worked in the local paper in the East End of London.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that's what it is. You're in Bethnal Green and you go to a local school, and 3 years ago it was just a local normal school in London, and then now 90% of the kids are from Bangladesh, and they only speak Bengali when they arrive, and their mums don't speak any English at all, and the whole local area has changed, and there is no mixing between the white working class, the white middle class, who've just the yuppies who've moved in, and the Bangladeshi. That's particularly Bangladeshi. Other areas in London are different heritage communities. But I remember looking at this and going, well, this doesn't work. And everyone calling those white working class Londoners who moved out racist. No, they just want to be able to have a conversation with another school mum at the school gates. That's all they're looking for. They just want to live where they grew up and where in the country they live in. And pointing that out makes you a racist.
But Julia, I think actually something has gone on more than this. I spent a bit of the summer getting out of London. I recommend it to anyone who lives here. But what I saw wherever I went is that there are parts of this country, all over the country, that are being turned into Bethnal Green. The political classes are attempting to Bethnal Greenize this entire country. And wherever it happens, people do the same thing. And by the way, just about white working classes moving out of the East End of London, if you don't think that people in Surrey, if you don't think that people in Hampshire have done exactly the same thing, then you are mad. They've just come up with a better way of explaining it than working class people that aren't necessarily as articulate at
I would say one of the things we are really seeing, actually, looking, what's happening in Epping, in Essex and in Nuneaton and Yorkshire, actually, they're being very articulate and very good at explaining
Operation Raise the Colours has changed something in this country. It has been, and I sit on as a political consultant. I find you get a lot of wisdom by sitting on little town Facebook groups, and every one of those groups in all over this country, they're talking about it in a way that people never did before.
It's changed. There is a definite sea change.
A huge national
and again,
awakening.
you do just get into that issue, and Elon Musk has been tweeting, and he is stirring things up. And again, I don't really think he does understand where this country is, because he thinks Tommy Robinson is the solution. Tommy Robinson is not the solution. But although he has been right about a lot of things, and I've always said that he has a go at me every now and then on social media, he has been right about a number of things over the years, and people ignored him, I've always said that. However, this is the thing, if you've got a country and a political class, and let's face it, a media class as well, that is a bit embarrassed by our flag, or they don't mind it if it's if it's a black athlete winning gold at the Olympics, get the flag out. That's absolutely fine. And isn't it wonderful to cherish our diversity? That's when they like the flag. They can live with the Union Jack, just about, right? Certainly no problem with the Welsh flag or the Scottish flag. Oh no, that's just proud people. The English flag, no, that's just a racist, bigoted flag. Well, I'm never letting anyone take over my flag. I was born in England. I'm English. That's my flag. I fly that flag during every football tournament. But people who, if you look at, we've got some footage up now. You look at someone flying that flag, and if your first reaction is, I bet they're dodgy and right, nasty far right, probably racist, probably this, probably that. If that is your reaction when you see someone flying your flag, you are the problem, not the flag flyer. Because you should, if you are ashamed of your national flag and you associate it with such negativity, you're the one with the problem.
But I almost feel like we need to remind our audience that there is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong whatsoever. In fact, it should be celebrated. If you're the kind of person that is proud to be English, if you're the kind of person that is proud of our heritage, our culture, our traditions, what we gave the world,
Absolutely.
what we provide, what we continue to provide, the fact that when everybody else in Europe fell over for this continent's greatest dictator, that we stood firm, that we held fast, that we delivered when no one else will. If you like our customs, our values, that everything else that means to be English, good on you. Keep going, and don't vote for politicians anymore that are ashamed, that are sniffing, that are turning their nose up at you, at me, that everybody cares about the country that we live in.
That's it. It's really that simple. But again, these people, the same reason why they sneered at everyone who voted for Brexit, 52% of us, by the way, but they still won that one. They're still fighting that war. No, we've done that war, guys. We did it years back. But the key thing is they are not proud of their country, and they don't believe in borders. And they really don't understand any of these values. They genuinely believe that the world's a better place if it was one big melting pot. They think all cultures are equal, or religions are equally morally valid, that we're all the same. I mean, they're living in cloud cuckoo land. There are very, very, very simple facts you can show about whether, you know, cultures are superior or not. Here's the giveaway. We don't have a load of people from Britain desperately trying to get to Syria or Afghanistan or Iran or Eritrea or any of these other countries or Saudi Arabia. Anything. Why don't we do that? They might be going to Dubai, but only because they're going to the westernised bit, the bit of Dubai pretending to be all Western. That's the bit they're going to. I mean, there's a reason why people aren't moving from the West to these countries is because they don't have superior values. Our culture, our civilization, our values, our rule of law is the superior culture.
Yes.
And if you don't believe that, you haven't been paying attention. That's the main thing. You haven't been paying attention.
I am not ashamed to say that I believe that English culture, in particular, and I accept that our Welsh and Scottish listeners might disagree with us.
I'd go British. Come on.
But I think there are cultural differences between Englishmen and a Scotsman.
Yeah.
I think everybody can see that. I'm an Englishman. I happen to think that my culture, that what my country, as our nation within the country, has offered the world, from Shakespeare to everything else, is the greatest contribution to the history of mankind ever. It's why all of our former colonies, whether that's United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, there's so many prosperous countries all around the world that stand out as shining beacons in whichever landmass that they happen to sit. It's because they have taken our values, our culture, and I think it's the greatest culture in the history of human civilization.
I want to stand up and wave a flag now.
And I don't think that I am racist for believing that or saying that.
No, but genuinely, the North London dinner party class do think that is wrong to even think that. But that's your problem. But again, I don't want to have anyone either running for government or in government in this country who doesn't believe that.
Because when they do believe it, what they do is they get into office and then they happily allow that culture to be dissipated, watered down, in parts overrun and taken over. That is what we have seen in recent British history.
Look, I'm sure a lot of people are cheering us on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. 0344 499 1000. Do you know what? Call in whether you agree or disagree on that. I'd love to hear from you, particularly if you genuinely think, like, no, we haven't got superior culture and multiculturalism is the answer. I'm wondering if there's anyone who's just accidentally tuned in from, I don't know, Times Radio or somewhere accidentally, and you might think that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll put you right, but there we are. Where are you on Angela Rayner? We spoke to a Labour councillor, Sebastian Salek, who I thought put a valiant argument up. Like, he doesn't think that Angela Rayner appearing to basically dodge inheritance, not evade, avoid inheritance tax. Wouldn't we all try and do that? And avoiding capital gains tax. Basically, let's face it, with some rinky-dink shuffling around of property and sales and moving into a trust for a kid, all this stuff, all completely legal. But let's face it, pretty much most people, particularly the very wealthy, all the stuff they do to avoid these taxes is also completely legal. But she'd be the first to criticise. Rishi Sunak's wife, she was a non-dom, perfectly legal, but she criticised that. Now, I believe quite rightly, I didn't think she should be non-dom and be married to the Prime Minister of this country and live here with her kids at school here. I'm amazed they're all still in the country, to be honest with you. But I'm not in California by now. But are people just gunning for her, as he claimed, because she's a woman, because she's working class, or are they gunning for her because she's just a big flat-out hypocrite?
Look, if the shoe was on the other foot, everybody that is defending her would be attacking the Tories, and everyone that is attacking her would be defending whichever of the Tories. And I've been in Westminster for a long time. I've seen a bunch of these stories. Here's the thing. Most people in the country choose to do whatever they can do to keep their tax as low as possible, whether that's using an ISA, whether that's sticking money in their pension.
Buy a bottle of duty-free gin or a packet of fags in duty-free, you're avoiding tax.
Whatever they're doing, that's fine. Look, there is such a thing as kind of more aggressive, legitimate, but more aggressive tax avoidance. That is what she's done. She's obviously done it to keep her tax down.
That's what I think Gary Lineker would do.
It is a bad look. It's a bad look if you are the Deputy Prime Minister of this country and you have cheered on every attempt to go after the super rich, which you are by now, by the way.
Not super rich, but she's definitely rich.
She's in the top 1-2% of earners in this country.
Easily.
And as a result, you're the 1% now, Angela, and we do get to hold you accountable. And I won't have for 1 minute Labour councillors coming on and telling me that I am sexist, telling me that it's
as a
some
woman,
other form
I
of
hate it when
bigotry.
people claim if you're criticising a woman or something that's said in the Commons,
it is sexist. It is sexist to come on here and say that we should hold Angela Rayner to lower expectations because she is a prominent female politician.
Do some papers gun for her though, because she is flamboyant, she's working class, she's gobby.
She's the only cabinet minister that they've
heard of
with a personality.
True.
Maybe...
Let me tell you about the government's reshuffle. Darren Jones, James Murray, Dan Tomlinson. Genuinely, could you pick them up in a line? I mean, I would struggle with Dan Tomlinson. I could probably do Darren Jones and James Murray. But if I passed them on the train station, I'd probably think, oh, that's when you're talking about someone who's like number 2 to the Chancellor.
But here's what I would say. Like, if I was the Labour Party, I would be ditching Keir and sticking in Angela as soon as possible, because I think the British public will respect a bit of her gumption, will respect a bit of the fact that she's got
I like her. I don't like her when she says things like calling all Tories scum and things like that, and gets away with that sort of stuff, which she did. But she's got,
And her allies have talked up her prospects of doing precisely that, of taking over and being Prime Minister. And I'm sorry, but if you want to lead this country, you're going to get held to account. There's no way of dodging it.
And there is a big thing, again, we go back to MPs and their expenses and all of that, and a lot of things, is that, if you want to be one of the people making the laws in this country, and this comes back to Boris Johnson and Partygate and Keir Starmer, things like the hypocrisy over all the donated stuff, you need to be whiter than white. You need to be above board, and it is not just about doing the right thing. You must be seen to do the right thing. It's about setting an example. It's about not fiddling. There are lots of different ways you could, I could do that or this or my tax. Maybe not doing it, because it would, it's not something that is available to most people, because they can't, buy a house and designate that their main home when it's a flat they're going to go to a max one Saturday out of every 2 weeks, and they can't claim that's their main home, because of course that's not where they're living as their main home, because they're working in London.
Yeah, and only more so if you're the kind of person that's been preaching for years about precisely these things that we can all see in our own mind, having taken the other line. And not, by the way, also at a time when the country is basically bankrupt because of decisions that you and your party mates have taken, and you've frozen pensioners to death last winter. Not my words, the words of Labour's own estimate of what that policy would do. If you've done that, if you've led the country up the garden path, don't be surprised when people are a little bit cross to see that you've taken a little bit of a dodge, a little bit of a fiddle, in order to get yourself 40 grand off.
I still think one of the fascinating things about this government, even long, year and a bit into their election, is that they are still a little bit shocked at actually being asked questions, asked to justify themselves, facing scrutiny, and actually being held to account, because they obviously thought that this whole government thing was all quite easy, because they'd just been used to making an announcement. Yeah, now you've actually got to get stuff done. Turns out it's quite hard, isn't it? And especially when every announcement you make, frankly, is just full of nonsense and hot air, and you're backtracking on virtually every major announcement anyway. You just see how hard it is. But this is what worries me: it's the quality of people we've got in government now. We are in tough times, and we need good people, and we ain't got good people in government. 11:25 is the time. I'd love to hear from you. Tell us your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Oh, if you want to mention Greta off to Gaza and a flotilla again, honestly, keep her. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Oh yeah, we haven't even got to Queen Camilla, assaulted on a train as a teenager, apparently telling Boris Johnson that I don't know what word I'm allowed to say on air, but using the heel of her shoe to take action to defend herself in a rather private, painful place between a man's legs. Well played, Camilla. We always knew you had it in you. All that coming up. This is Talk.
This is a triumph for media organisations like Talk TV, for the online right-wing media, for everyone who had a courage to actually say that mass deportations are the right thing to do before it became what is now a mainstream thing to say. Don't forget that it was only 12 to 18 months ago that Nigel Farage was saying things like mass deportations will be impractical or too hard. He was saying it would take us down a very dark path. He has, in this instance, I think, followed the mood of the nation.
I think
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. It's 11:29. Let's get straight to your calls coming in thick and fast. 0344 499 1000. Ian is in Cambridge and wants to have his say. What do you want to say, Ian?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Julia. First time on your show, funny enough.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yes. Prior to that, I used to be on, Mike Graham I was on once, and also Ian Collins.
Oh, well, you've got the pedigree. You're an old hand. You know what to do. What do you want to say?
Indeed. Well, to some extent. Yes, I'm saying I'm proud to be English, proud to be British, proud to be black as well. Not that makes any difference. My parents came to this country 70 years ago from the Caribbean to better themselves. Citizens to some extent, and they said we want to adopt all the values and take advantage, work hard, get the rewards, and pass those things on to their children, which they have done to us, to the present generation. I personally think I totally agree with your gentleman Sam saying the fact that we should be proud for what we have and who we are collectively as Brits, and I think that other countries are jealous of us. They don't have, they'd love it, but they don't want it. And to be honest, they sort of think it's some sort of, it's been hard earned. I've said this to veterans, and I went abroad during VE Day, funny enough, and I said it's interesting. The people who lived and died for the freedom we have now, would not be pleased as how it's being undermined.
Absolutely.
We're being called bigots, racists. It's not just racism. It's sort of this kind of tribalism. You've got to be this end and that end. Whereas in actual fact, from the point of view, out into the world have been innovations from British people, English, Scots, whatever, a collective responsibility. And
absolutely.
I think we need to get that back. That is what Britishness is.
And it is what unites us, and it does unite us at times. And again, I think it's the politicians, but I would say it's the politicians on the left who have been dividing us. This and basically saying, we can't run our own business. We need to stay in the EU. We need to have the World Health Organization telling us this and the UN telling us that, and we should be ashamed of our past, ashamed of our flag. And that it just doesn't chime with what British people not think, but know.
They've lost the cutting edge with regard to the patriotism. I'm a citizen. I'm also a patriot. And I'm looking to myself, projecting over the next few years. I'm saying, if this politics is like this in a few years' time, I might be stepping into it in order to improve it.
That's the thing. We've got to put our money where our mouths are, haven't we? David, such a great call. I'm sorry, but Ian, apologies. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that call, Ian. David is in North London. David, you want to have your say on Angela Rayner. Where are you standing on her?
Hi, Julia. Lovely to speak to you.
And you.
You know what? I think she's actually a symptom of something much wider. Do you remember, as I'm sure you do, the adults are back in the room, the sensible people are in charge, everything's going to be better because, Lego head Keir Starmer is very sensible and very good and very wise. If I just go through a list I even have in my head, you have Rushanara Ali as a homelessness minister that turned out to be a rogue landlord. You have Tulip Siddiq, who is alleged to have done some nefarious things involved with Bangladesh, borderline corruption. You have Jonathan Reynolds lied on his CV and had to apologise.
Didn't know whether he'd been a solicitor or not.
No, exactly. To be honest, nor do I. Can't remember whether I was or I wasn't.
Yeah, it's so difficult to remember, isn't it?
All of us. Yeah. You then have Rachel Reeves, who's just happens to be the Chancellor, also happens to have very badly fabricated her CV. And then you have Angela Rayner, who does what she's done now, and funny, she's dabbling in trust and all sorts. She's becoming a bit more libertarian because now Bridget Philliston's also saying, well, there's a private tax affairs. Why are we commenting on people's private tax affairs? And it's just really funny how we were told that adults are back in the room, but it actually just seems like this country's gone back to kindergarten.
Yeah, actually, and by the way, they're all wearing donated clothes because apparently they're on six-figure salaries but can't afford their own clothes.
Well, they're wearing donated clothes and glasses, and I think the other problem that we really have with this is, and like you've said it quite well, no one cares. Angela Rayner has 2 or 3 houses. She can have 20 houses for what we can.
Good on her for doing well. Yeah,
absolutely. But ultimately, like you say, she's one of the first people to call out all of these people, and to call out people doing legitimate things. Again, Rishi Sunak's wife bought him a £200 thermos flask.
Yeah.
And do you remember the outrage of how out of touch he is? I can tell you what, more people can afford that thermos flask than can even know how to use a trust or what a trust even is.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, 200 quid, by the way, wouldn't even pay an hour's fees for the lawyers or the tax advisors advising on that trust. That's the thing. David, fantastic call. Thank you very much indeed. 2 excellent calls. Guys, they're setting a high bar for you. Do get in touch, have your say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Coming up next, we're going to be talking more about what is going on with those asylum protesters, particularly those in Epping. We'll talk to Reform candidate in Epping, Orla Minahan. She's been at all of those protests. She was there when police went in, arrested some female protesters who, well, according to her, weren't doing anything wrong. We'll talk to her about that and why, well, whether or not the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and others really just don't get why the British people are so upset about illegal migration. That's up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. We've been talking a lot this morning about how the government making an announcement that the Home Secretary is doing in the House of Commons today. Yvette Cooper, press release comes out. Sam wants to put them in the shredder every single Monday morning because it was just so useless and out of touch. But announcing tighter rules for asylum seekers bringing their families to the UK. And, best basically, if you do get approved for asylum after coming here illegally on a boat or in a lorry, whatever, then you can bring family members in. Again, why? But then you can also, they're going to have to speak a bit better English and have a bit more money than they previously did, as if that is really addressing the issues of the British people. Well, one person who definitely does know what the attitude of the British people is right now is Reform UK Council candidate for Epping, and that is Orla Minahan, who has been joining many local people at those protests outside the infamous now Bell Hotel in Epping. Of course, the subject of that Court of Appeal judgment on Friday. Orla, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi,
Hello.
how are you doing?
Very
Thank
well.
you, Julia.
Before we get on to what's been happening over the weekend, Annie, I'd love to go back over, what happened on Friday in that Court of Appeal judgment. Some extraordinary things said by Home Office lawyers, certainly there. What do you make of the Home Secretary's announcement today? Does it touch the sides of the concerns of the people you know?
They're completely out of touch, Julia. They're not listening, they're not understanding, they're not engaging. It's not just Epping. This is up and down this country. Every town, every city, protests, people out putting flags up saying we've had enough, we don't want this anymore, please listen to us. Our rights are being put on the back burner. Our rights don't matter as much as the rights of migrants that are coming into the country.
Well, you were told that by the Home Office lawyer in the Court of Appeal. Literally said that. And Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary on telly yesterday, agreed.
Repeated it. So, I can't understand how you can see what's going on. Elon Musk can see what's going on and tweets and says the people of Epping, the people of Bournemouth, yet our own government are completely blinkered. It's bizarre.
I genuinely do think they don't get it. They really don't understand what people are protesting against. And if you're holding an England flag, you're probably a racist anyway, so we don't have to listen to you. We'll send the police in. But it is very interesting in terms of what was said in that Court of Appeal. We had the bizarre thing where the official government policy is to get illegal migrants, asylum seekers they call them, but they are illegal migrants, most of them, to get them out of hotels and into houses of all multiple occupation, hostels and the like, but get them out of hotels, even though they then spent the day in court on Friday arguing to have them kept in this hotel, the Bell Hotel, even though local people and the local council object. But the argument that the judge seemed to accept, who's, full-on sort of, ex-Fabian Society Labour guy, the argument he seemed to accept was that the protests were causing a problem. But if he changed policy on this and gave in and closed the hotel because of the threat of disruption from the protest, that would encourage more protests, so he shouldn't do it. What did you make of that argument?
You see, I think that there's such a blurred sense of people's anger. Like you say, people stand outside hotels and say, we don't want these hotels here. We don't want these men in these hotels. They pose a risk. And then you're straight away called a racist and right wing. So your argument or your standpoint and your point of view is thrown out without anybody listening or accepting or trying to understand what it is that you've got an issue with. My argument has always been that if you get these men out of these hotels and put them into the communities, they pose a bigger risk.
That's always my concern, because the reality is right now, they're not going to be in camps. The government's not going to do that where they're secure. They're not going to be sent out of the country. They're going to be here. Is it not safer? And I've got an asylum hotel within a 10-minute walk of my place. I didn't know about it until a friend of mine tried to book a room at the hotel, for family members. And then we discovered this local facility was gone. But I would rather they were there and we knew where they were than that they were put into, private accommodation competing with local families, or worse, council accommodation competing with people on the very bottom of the social and economic ladder who really need that accommodation, which is also what's happening.
So there's a couple of things. It's difficult because you want to protest because you don't want these men in these hotels. Ultimately, there are no curfew on these men. There's no curfew. There is no security guards at these hotels. There are random guys that are there wearing masks, standing around. They're not security.
They are security, because the same as my local one, they're security to stop you going in.
Well, to stop us going in and to
that's what they're for.
It's manned. But I mean, these men are coming out, Julia, at night. They are going across to Bell Common, which is opposite the hotel. They're buying drugs. They are getting drunk. They're hanging around. They're coming back at 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Have you witnessed this yourself?
Absolutely witnessed it. Absolutely. So you've got that. So my view is put a curfew on them. Keep them, if they've got to be in a hotel, then keep them in that hotel and give them very clear guidelines about when they're allowed out and when they're not.
I mean, I certainly would think that it would be perfectly reasonable that people should be tagged who were here illegally.
Absolutely.
That seems to me.
Something.
And again, if you're desperate and you're fleeing from persecution elsewhere, you'd be quite happy for that to be the case. But the reality is that's not going to happen, certainly under this government. What do you make of the protests? And I know you were speaking at one of the protests yesterday. We've had protests not just in Epping, where there have been arrests, but also at Canary Wharf, where we saw a police officer got punched. Pepper spray was used by police on a man, but also we know a child was affected by the pepper spray. What happened in Epping, and what do you make of how the police are largely handling these protests, bearing in mind often, and particularly at Canary Wharf, you've actually got more people protesting for the asylum seekers than you've got against?
Yeah, we didn't have any counter-protesters last night. After Friday, everybody was very, very angry and upset. Of course they were. But last night, we said very clearly, this is a peaceful protest. Sunday night, bring families, bring older people. There were people there, Julia, in wheelchairs. There were elderly people. There were children. There must have been 1,500 people in Epping. The police, from the minute we got there, were heavy-handed. They were en masse. And I said to the police officer, the liaison officer, why are there so many of you here? There's no counter-protests. What is it that you think we're going to do? There were Sussex, Essex, Kent, the Met, and they were all in riot gear. And straight away, you sensed that there was something that wasn't quite right. We then left outside the bell. We walked up towards the council offices. Peaceful, singing, waving flags, nothing untoward. And then Sarah, who is a friend of mine and has been one of the mums who has been, she's not a leader, she's not, an agitator. She's just
an ordinary mum.
The organiser, one of the organisers, went up the stairs of the council building and held a flag.
Yeah, I've seen the footage. She's literally draping a flag.
Everyone
There was a Union Jack, wasn't it?
Union Jack.
Over the balcony of the stairwell. This is a public building.
Public building.
Local
Now,
council.
apparently there was a section something in place, but we didn't know. How do we know what section's in place? So she did that.
So she wasn't actually allowed. So wait a minute. So as a local taxpayer, she wasn't allowed to enter, to stand on the external steps of that building?
Apparently. That's apparently why she was arrested. So...
And it looked very heavy-handed, the arrest, because she's quite a petite woman, isn't she?
She's 5'3" and weighs 7 stone. And they four men took her down onto the concrete on the top of the stairs. They handcuffed her behind her back and they dragged her down the stairs and put her in the back of a meat wagon. Julia, it may surprise you, I have had very, very little interaction with the police in my life, maybe speeding 2 miles over the limit. So I've never seen police in action like this. Yeah. But I was mortified. Women were crying, it was horrendous scenes. And because of that, obviously, tensions got high, the police barricaded us in. It was so unnecessary.
And especially as we've seen in previous policing, people say, well, why weren't the police in riot gear? And we're told by chief police officers, because that kind of can provoke things, and we try and do low-key policing. One of the things the British police over the years have been very good at is very low-key policing. But when I see those marches every 2 weeks through London, which are terrifying for my fellow Jewish citizens, pro-Palestinian, people shouting about, destroying Israel and supporting a terrorist group, blatantly often, I don't see police in riot gear.
No, and
but for mums and kids and old people in wheelchairs, well, different priorities.
You know what it was, Julia? They wanted to make an example of somebody, and they made an example of her, and they got it so wrong. And then I heard them say, "Where's the other one? Go and get the other one," which was me, obviously. And I'm not, like I said to you, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, and I sort of went. So hid behind the bush. And then we went back they said to me, I went over to the police officer in charge and said, will you let her go? What can I do? He said, take everyone back to the bell calmly and disperse and we'll let her go, which is what we did. And they haven't. And she's still in custody.
Can I just ask, has she got in touch with the Free Speech Union?
I haven't been able to
strongly advise. I strongly advise, but putting out a flag as an expression of freedom. I've got Sam Armstrong in here right now. Does a lot of work with the Free Speech Union. She should definitely get in touch with you guys, shouldn't she? Orla, we'll make sure you've got a number for someone to contact, for you can pass that on. But she should absolutely do that. Again, peaceful protest is what's allowed in this country, as long as it stays peaceful. And I know that you've been I've watched some of the speeches you've made. People have a right to say this and not be treated as if they're criminals in their own land.
I fear, Julia, that they're going to try. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to scare people by arresting women, by pepper spraying Lorraine, who is a 72-year-old lady in Canary Wharf, to try and scare us into not protesting.
I think also, to a certain extent, to provoke trouble, and then they can say, see, look, they're troublemakers. Don't give in to them. We must rise above that. Peaceful protest is an important part
of our constitution.
Yes,
absolutely.
Keep in touch. We'll pass on some numbers. Orla Minahan, Reform UK Council candidate for Epping. Thank you very much. Sam, I know you want to come back in on that.
Look, the government of this country just think it's easier to send in riot police to go after grannies, mums, people peacefully protesting that what is happening to their local community, that it is to deal with what we're going on. And we now know what the plan is. Nigel Farage set out last week pretty much what you have to do to stop this issue, if not overnight, pretty darn quickly. They are making a conscious decision that it is easier to go after the people that are unhappy, to shut us up, to try and calm us down, to tell us that, look, if you go down this line, you're going to end up banged up too. Look what we did to Lucy Connolly. We'll come after it and do precisely the same to you.
Yeah, that's
what they're trying to do.
I just don't think it's going to work. But there we are. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that interview. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 11:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about the Archbishop of York, acting head of the Church of England, putting his tuppence worth and his big nose into British politics. But should religious leaders be telling politicians what they can and cannot do? And what does an archbishop think he knows about migration policy and indeed benefit policy? We'll talk about that up next with the former Anglican Bishop Gavin Ashenden. This is Talk.
calling a big end.
We have to get away. And it's not just the ECHR, it's also some of the other conventions which have established themselves in British law and I think have been over-interpreted. Interestingly to hear Jack Straw and David Blunkett talking about this last week. Genuinely amazing to hear them saying, actually, this was never our intention, because it was always meant to be advisory. You know, you can listen to what the ECHR said, but you don't need to adopt what it says. Our courts have taken that with some of these activist judges in a totally different position. They've absolutely gone hell for leather for whatever has come across their desk.
This is a trial.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 11:52 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about archbishops. This time it's the Archbishop of York. Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, sort of like, kind of out of a job at the moment. But Stephen Cottrell is the Archbishop of York. And as a result of that title, he is the acting head of the Church of England. An interview on Sky News yesterday, he decided, along with pretty much everyone who's ever held any of these roles, to have a go at anyone on the right of British politics. Plus ça change, I think we can safely say. But he echoed the sort of criticism we've heard from all of his predecessors, basically criticising what he called knee-jerk, short-term policies from reform when it came to migrant deportation, saying the plan won't solve the problem long-term. Not quite sure why he thinks anyone else's policies will. But he also was very critical of the two-child benefit cap, which the government, we're told, is looking to lift, but will cost a couple of billion quid of your and my money, to give more money to families who have a load of kids and for some reason choose not to work to support them themselves. But should politicians have to take criticism from archbishops, or should archbishops spend their time talking to their congregations rather than to Sky News readers? Well, let's talk to Gavin Ashenden. He's a former Anglican bishop, former Church of England priest and a former chaplain to the Queen. A very good morning to you, Gavin.
Hello, Julia. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Should religious leaders be given their tuppence worth on political issues, particularly very controversial political issues that are very, really do divide the nation?
So, Julia, this is a conversation, I think, in two parts. The first part is easy because the answer is going to be no, and I'll try and explain why as succinctly as possible. But there's another part which is much more difficult, I think, that I hope can get flagged up, which is what the role of the church is when your society turns increasingly totalitarian, because that's what's happening. So if we look at the first question, it's always very easy to exercise political commentary rather than spiritual judgment, because it's just, the levers. It's easier to pontificate politically than it is to say your prayers and to try and change people's lives internally. So, I mean, first of all, the Church of England is a dysfunctional organisation. It can't choose its own CEO, and we're fed up, of course, with the fact that the bishops and the clergy are all paid up. Well, perhaps not paid up, but they all express themselves as socialists, whereas the people in the pews, on their whole, somewhere near the centre.
Whenever there is any interjection into British politics, it's always entirely predictable what side they're going to take.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And so this is really silly of them, because what they're doing is they're disenfranchising their own flock. Their job is to look after a mixed political community, some on the left, some in the middle, some on the right, some no politics at all. So it's really silly in that situation to come out with some very strong politics from a fairly extreme part of the spectrum. It's just irresponsible if you're running an organisation which is multi-political because it's got a different agenda. So that's silly. Then, of course, there's a whole business of what do they know, and the answer is they don't know very much.
Well, he's got a media studies degree from a former Polly, so I'm sure he knows everything about both topics. And I'm being facetious, but
Yeah, and of course, I'm trying not to be, I'm trying not to be rude and ad hominem. But the fact is, they sound like third-rate council politicians, and it's not a good look. It's not very competent. They're not very good at they're not good at their day job, let alone good at their hobby.
Well, remember we had, I've lost track of which useless archbishop it was, but was criticising payday lenders and saying how outrageous these payday lenders were.
Yes, that was Wellbeing.
Yeah, and then we found out that the church was invested in a payday lending company.
Yes, of course. The real job of the church is to transform human nature. This is a very big task. It's immensely important, and our whole civilization depends on the church doing it well. Western civilization has grown out of Christendom, and it's done some very beautiful things, including, and this is the most important thing, I think, the sanctity of the individual. You basically don't get to kill people or imprison them because they are made in the image of God. Now, you don't have to believe in God, but it's a very good protection for the safety of people
and it's about,
in any circumstances.
It's the key, and this is very different from a lot of other religions. The key role of your status as an individual with having value in itself. I'm a fundamentalist atheist, but even I completely recognise again our entire way of life is built on that, Judeo-Christian culture. Here's the thing, though. If you're an archbishop, you're there to sort of, to preach on behalf of, the poor huddled masses. You have to worry about the rich people. They're doing okay. But, this is what Jesus Christ is all about, the poor people. If you think these people are desperate migrants, they've got nothing, we should be welcoming them in from the rest of the world. If you're worried about, say, the poorest families, and often they are families often of immigrant heritage, statistically that is the case, and they've got 3 or 4 or 5 kids, and they're not getting any extra benefits as a result of those extra children after 2, the 2-child benefit cap, you're concerned about them and you're worried about them living in poverty. Don't you have a duty to speak out?
Well, I'd like... Can I move the conversation on slightly? Because so if I say to you as an atheist, look, the thing that you and I are absolutely convinced about is the integrity of human beings and their basic freedoms. Christianity does that. But there are other systems that competing for our allegiance politically that don't do that. And we're facing 2 of them at the moment. And one is from the left, so totalitarian Marxist states don't do it. And the other is from what I'll call the far right, which in this case is Islam. Under Sharia law, you don't get those things either. Effectively, whether you're a Christian or just a Democrat, only Christianity as an ideology provides this. So basically, Democrats and Christians ought to make an allegiance if either the left or the right are going to take away our freedoms. Now, you've just had a very moving story about the growth of the state here taking away our freedoms. So what should the church be doing in this case? It doesn't have a right to talk about immigration policy or benefits, but what it does have a right to do is to talk about the overreach of the state, compelling citizens who ought to have certain freedoms. That's what we should be hearing from our archbishops. Now, the other problem is that the people who are coming in are Muslims, and there's a perfectly pleasant conversation to be had about the
time is against us. I've got to warn you, I've got about 10 more seconds. Sorry, Gavin.
43% of the Islamic community in this country wants Sharia law. Sharia law is not democratic, it's not people friendly, and that's what's coming.
And it's certainly not British culture. And we need to talk about this stuff openly and not just shout big at anyone who raises these issues. Gavin Ashton, really interesting. I must come on again soon, talk at greater length. Lots of really interesting points there. I'm going to get Sam Armstrong's thoughts on that, and also what Steve Baker's got to say, former government minister as well. It's all coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me. And however you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, or however you're watching us on YouTube or your connected device, I so appreciate you joining us. If you can't find us on YouTube, really easy to find Talk TV. I've always got a link when I put out a tweet, post, whatever it is, on X every morning about what we've got on the show. I always put a link in the next message telling us where you can find us on YouTube. So do have a look at that if you haven't before. And don't forget, if you've missed anything on the show, you want to see something we talked about last week, I don't know, don't forget to go to my YouTube page. It's called the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You can hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about where we are on the asylum and illegal migrants, and the hotels, and the criticism of Nigel Farage from Archbishop, and indeed from Keir Starmer, basically saying that Nigel Farage is scaremongering over channel migrants. Don't think he is Prime Minister, but I certainly do think most people would agree that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and indeed the Prime Minister and others are really failing to get the actual problem, because their big announcement today, first day back of the new Commons term, announcing a tightening of rules for migrants who are granted asylum about the family members they can bring. They'll have to have better English skills and have a bit more money. They're also going to outline reforms to the asylum appeal system. They are totally out of touch with the level of concern and what the actual concern is of families. So we're going to be talking about that. Plus, for an awful lot of families, school has restarted today, or certainly will this week. And the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has warned parents of the dangers of poor attendance from the start of the school year, children returning. And it comes as data shows more than half of pupils have missed some of the first week, who then go on to become persistently absent. It's really obvious that, isn't it? Your kids need to be in school. I do not understand why people want their kids not in school. Are you guys crazy? Anyway, we'll talk about that. Plus, a disabled child was banned from a summer camp after his mother expressed what could be known as gender-critical views. On a form, she was asked to basically say what his preferred pronouns were. She pointed out that he was, clearly didn't have preferred pronouns because the child was clearly the sex the child was. But both the child and the mum have been banned from this summer camp simply because she expressed A, factual truth, and B, something she is legally allowed to express. We're going to be talking about that coming up very soon. Plus also the visas giving to drag artists for no good reason at all under the visa system we've got. That's all coming up. Loads and loads of calls still coming in as well. I want to get your reaction to everything we're talking about, but in particular this total, just literally fiddling while Rome burns level of announcements on dealing with illegal migrants, asylum seekers, so the ones who've actually managed to get asylum here, about them, what family members they can bring to the country and what they have to, the small hoops they have to get through, not really, to be able to come here. What's your reaction to this announcement? And indeed, Keir Starmer saying that Nigel Farage is scaremongering over channel migrants. Do you think he's scaremongering, or is he actually being one of the few politicians actually telling the truth for the last 20 years? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. I will get to some of those texts. I've been getting in the calls earlier on, but I'll get to some text in the next half hour as well. I'm delighted to say commentator Sam Armstrong is still here. We locked the doors so he couldn't get out, basically. And in a couple of moments, we're going to talk to Steve Baker, former Conservative government minister. But Sam Armstrong, thank you once again for joining us. Look, I can't believe yet again, week after week after week, the issue of migration is coming up. It's the number one issue in the polls for people. It's over the economy now. And let's face it, the economy is in a bad state. And it's over the NHS. The NHS is in a bad state. Imagine how bad the migration issue has to be for us to make that the number one issue. But here's the thing. The government thinks, clearly the Prime Minister thinks, that if everyone just stopped talking about it, then it wouldn't be an issue. And it's all being stirred up by these protesters, probably far right. They like the England flag. Nigel Farage, definitely a bigot, because he talked, and he's a Brexiteer. And if we can just sort of take it off the TV screens, out of the newspapers, and just put people out of hotels so people don't know about it, then everything will just go away and the British people will be absolutely fine with having a much more richly diverse and opening country. The man is stark staring mad if he thinks this, isn't he?
Yeah, and the weird thing is actually the British public aren't asking for that much, right? They're pretty darn consistent on the point. Yeah. They've just said, look, we want a quantity of high-skilled, very good people coming into the country every year that add something. We don't want this dross from around the world that's coming in on student visas and work visas to do jobs that basically Brits could do anyway. And we certainly don't want people breaking into the country, whether through on lorries through the Channel Tunnel or on small boats.
Or overstaying their visas.
Or overstaying their visas. We just want them gone. This is a country that, you know, there are massive parts of the British state that are totally broken. But ultimately, we are also a nuclear power with an air force, with stealth jets and nuclear submarines that can do amazing, phenomenal things. It is not beyond the wit of man to sort this out. And it hasn't been beyond the wit of man for 20, 30 years of the British public consistently in every single election voting for political parties that have told them in terms that they will stop the boats, that they will smash the gangs, that they will get migration down to under 100,000 a year. And then as soon as they walk in the door, each and every time they have not been prepared to do any of the things necessary to achieve that.
But why not?
Well, some of them are uncomfortable. Some of them are going to have economic costs. By the way, the British public are very happy with that. They've said so in polls and in focus groups and all.
It's like on Brexit. Oh, there might be an economic cost short term. Yeah, you told us about that, and people went, "That's fine."
But and it pains me to say this because you know many people go into politics for the right reasons, but too many people go into politics as a career step, one of many things that they wish to do in the career. And the moment they're there, the moment they're occupying high office, they've got their eyes on which cushy non-executive board job they're going to do afterwards.
Big business is saying, can we import some more people from the third world who work really, really cheaply? And that's the reality. Sam, always good to hear your views, and I'm sure people are just cheering you on, just expressing exactly why what a lot of people are feeling. Let's ask someone who's actually been in government, former Conservative government minister, Steve Baker, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Very good afternoon to you, Steve.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank
you very much indeed for having me on.
I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with a single word that Sam Armstrong said in terms of, you know, politicians have, you know, they've asked the question, what do voters want on this issue of migration? And every single election, even Keir Starmer and that lot had to play along with this in 2024. They were asked, you know, do you want more or less migration? We'd like a lot less, please. And they've been promised it. We've never got it. Why have politicians not delivered it? And do you have any faith, whether that legal or illegal, and illegal has become a much bigger issue in recent years, do you have any faith that this government is going to tackle either of them?
Well, I certainly don't have any faith that a Labour government will tackle these issues. If I did, I would have joined the Labour Party, and I certainly don't. So, no, but I mean, Sam raises a very good point. I'm afraid year after year, including in manifestos on which I stood, we said we'd get migration down to the tens of thousands and then didn't. Now, I don't know why ministers didn't do that because I was never a minister in the relevant department and didn't have the conversations within government. But honestly, I would love for successive Home Secretaries to be asked the question, why didn't you keep that manifesto?
And it's not like it was 150,000 or 100,000. It went up under the Boris wave after Brexit, which is why it's even more insane when we could control the numbers, to over 1 million people. 1.2 million migrants came to this country. It was about 800,000 net in 1 year alone.
Well, I'm very fond of Boris, as most people seem to be who are on the centre right. But
no, I'm not.
I'm very, very conscious that if I was to criticise Boris, I get an enormous backlash.
So
but
what?
It has to be said.
What?
Well, it takes a bit of time to get through. I mean, it has to be said that Boris, on some of the issues that people really care about, amongst his key voters, they should be really disappointed that Boris let migration get out of control as he did. I mean, again, I really don't know what Boris, it has to be said, pretty were doing. It was very clear that although migration for people like me was not the top issue in the Brexit vote, it was very clear people expected migration to be brought under control, and Boris didn't deliver it.
He did the exact opposite, yeah. But then illegal migration has kind of taken over from that. But do you agree with Keir Starmer that Nigel Farage is scaremongering over channel migrants?
No, I don't agree with him. I mean, the reality is that in politics, it's essential that you give voice to legitimate public grievances. That's part of the job. Our parliament is a crucible for doing just that. And Nigel Farage is right. to give voice to those public concerns, and indeed so is Robert Jenrick, so is Chris Philp, the Conservative Justice and Home Affairs spokesman. They're right to give that voice, but it is really important that you give voice in a way which does actually say what you're going to do about it, and which doesn't unnecessarily alarm people. But that is the tightrope which politicians choose to walk. So I think if Keir Starmer is going to be critical of Nigel Farage, he should be really very specific about what he thinks Nigel's saying that's inaccurate. But criticising him just for giving voice to legitimate public grievance is actually deeply counterproductive.
Do you think your own party, the Conservatives, you're no longer an MP, but do you think that they are, well, frankly, trailing behind reform in terms of tackling some of these key issues? I mean, like, everyone expects that Kemi Badenoch at party conference is going to be announcing things like, you know, we're going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and the like, but, you know, reform are already way ahead on that stuff.
Well, look, there's a great realignment of politics going on at the moment. It used to be that the main axis of politics was socialism versus capitalism. These days, it's basically identity. On the one hand, cosmopolitan globalists who are very happy with international institutions and lots of migration, and on the other, communitarian nationalists who are much more concerned. And that realignment is really throwing all electoral coalitions into the air, and politicians are really struggling to deal with it. Well, in the midst of all that, people have just got very legitimate and practical concerns. They'd like illegal migration under control. And that's why I think Keir Starmer's comments actually are pretty dangerous. Trying to suppress legitimate opinion is not the right thing for a Prime Minister to be doing. And then on the other hand, of course, he made the Island of Strangers speech, which turned out to be inauthentic, because when his own people called him out on it, he backed away from it. And that's even worse, because then you can't trust a thing he says. So he's in a terrible mess. Obviously, I think he's the wrong man to be Prime Minister. I'd love for him to do the right thing. And I promise, if he does the right thing and stops the boats, stops illegal migration, I promise I'll come on your show and congratulate him on it.
As indeed would I. I've always been very clear. I'm not part of political all of these things. I will criticise policies or people I think do the wrong thing, and I will support when there is a good policy. The other day I remember saying, oh, this is a good policy from Labour, and I'll always say it when it is. But this is the thing. What do you make of the police and their involvement in this? Because they get dragged into this, but then, you know, my view is the police politicise themselves, or the police leaders have, not the men and women on the street doing the tough job. But we've got protests, you know, Epping and Canary Wharf and many other places around the country. A lot of outcry over that decision on Friday from that Court of Appeal judge to basically say, oh, because there might be trouble outside hotels housing illegal migrants, then you can't give in to that, because then you might get more trouble, and you encourage that. I mean, quite a bizarre argument, I thought. But riot police being put out, you've got 1,500 local families, kids, mostly led by women, local residents, no violence at all, people holding those awful national flags, and the riot police turned out. What do you make of that?
Well, I remind myself of the Pelian principles, and that one of those was that the public are the police and the police are the public, and that's really the way things ought to be. And the proportionality of policing is absolutely crucial. So it's one thing to have riot police on standby round the corner in case things pick up. It's another to present them immediately to the concerned public. But rank and file police officers, of course, deserve all of our sympathy. I'm old enough now that they're all starting to look very young. And senior police officers, while on the one hand, senior police officers are entitled to operational independence. The reason they have that is so that people aren't persecuted for political ends. The problem, of course, is that in terms of ideology and where they prioritise police action, unfortunately, it's been out of kilter with public opinion for a long time. And that's why we introduced elected police and crime commissioners.
How's that worked out? Come on.
Well, it's not worked out terribly well, partly because, of course, the police have resisted any kind of political control, but then they're getting it both ways because of this very political problem. I would say this is a good time for police and crime commissioners to make very clear what their police priorities ought to be, and to make it very clear that, yes, the police have got operational independence in terms of who's pursued through the courts and through the justice system, but that police and crime commissioners are entitled to say, no, that is disproportionate policing.
Yeah, I see that again and again and again. Can I ask you also? I know you're a Christian, and your faith is a big part of your life. What do you make of the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, criticising the Reform Party and Nigel Farage in particular, and saying that his policy on deporting migrants, policy I massively support, and indeed so does large members of the public, that this was knee-jerk and that it was not a long-term solution. He's now currently the acting head of the Church of England. Should archbishops be speaking out on political issues, and indeed speaking out saying he wants the two-child benefit cap to be axed as well? Is this his business? Is this within his remit?
It shouldn't be his priority, and I wish they'd stop it. I mean, honestly, since you ask, over the years, I've really wished that bishops and archbishops would prioritise preaching the gospel. I'm confident when we get to heaven, there'll be neither borders nor boundaries and no need for child benefit. But I wish they'd help more people get there. I mean, it is absurd that year after year, you hear more on public policy from religious leaders than you do on spirituality. Now, I've always tried to keep my religious views out of my policy decisions.
Tony Blair style, we don't do God.
Well, if people ask me, then I give an honest answer. I feel I'm under a command to do so. But it's a weird situation we are in, where actually we have an established church, but politicians don't do God, and it works pretty well. But I just really wish it would work the other way round. I wish the bishops and archbishops would really desist from politics and socialist pronouncements, as your previous guest said. I mean, it's Gavin Ashenden. I'm all in favour of Gavin Ashenden being the new Archbishop of Canterbury. I think if he was, I think I might rejoin the Church of England from the back.
Very interesting. Let's talk about Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister of this country. She called you lot scum at one point. Every Tory was scum. I had to apologise for that. She's also called for the wealthy to pay their fair share of tax. Like many people would argue that she's pretty well off on a six-figure salary, buying a second home. She's got a property empire. She doesn't. She's got a grace and favour apartment in Westminster as a result of her job. Not many of us get a free apartment as part of our job, but she's put her home in her constituency in Ashton-under-Lyne into a trust, avoiding inheritance tax, and conveniently around the same time buys herself an 800 grand property, a flat in Brighton, which is not where she lives or works, but in Hove near Brighton, and she's declared to the taxman that is her primary home. She's also appears to be registered to vote in all three places. Has she done anything wrong?
Well, she might not have done anything wrong. And this is, of course, one of the issues with politics, is that sometimes innocence is no excuse. And certainly, I nearly exploded during your news item, exploded with laughter when I heard a Labour spokesperson saying that it would be, I think they said, absurd if somebody volunteered to pay extra tax. I nearly exploded. I've spent years listening to Labour politicians saying we needed to do more against avoidance. They never popped up to say the public were right to avoid paying extra tax. I mean, it is comically hypocritical. The truth is that for politicians, particularly deputy prime ministers who perhaps aspire to replace the incumbent prime minister, should be paying the tax that Parliament intended. And I don't think that Parliament intended that people change the declaration of their main property in ways that are open to challenge, as this one obviously is, in order to diminish...
She hasn't moved. She hasn't moved to Hove. That's not where she's going to be deputy prime minister of this country, is it? It's not a constituency, although some people say it's that she can run, and she's hoping to get a safer seat there. Well, she's got a big threat against her in her current constituency. But it's not her main home. It's not in any meaningful way her main home.
Well, that appears to be the situation, but I'm very conscious that the last thing I want is to be dragged through this controversy when actually it's all about her. She should be asked these questions over and over and over again until she's given satisfactory answers, or until she's resigned.
Is this just sexism or classism and everyone has a go at her because of who she is? That's what some are claiming.
No, I think it's a bit daft to us when you haven't done it, but others have said she's amassing a property empire, and that is daft. Having a second home is not a property empire.
Lots of people would like to just own one home.
Well, indeed. And I'm getting involved with house building for precisely that reason. There are far too few homes being built. They're too expensive. And what we need is to turn house building on its head. We need to deliver far more affordable homes, low energy consumption homes that people can be proud to live in, beautiful homes for families.
I would say so small flats in Hove don't cost 800 grand.
Well, it's a pretty expensive home, isn't it? A flat that costs 800,000. And quite honestly, if she can afford it, I don't really begrudge it to her. But what I do begrudge is having spent 14 years in Parliament, listening to Labour politicians be really quite hysterical about not just tax avoidance and evasion, but tax planning. That is just arranging your affairs to pay less tax. And then at very best, it appears the Deputy Prime Minister has engaged in tax planning to minimise her tax liability. And then a spokesman pops up to say that it would be absurd if someone volunteered to pay extra tax. Well, they can't have their cake and eat it and expect to get away with it.
Well, he was a local councillor. He was not official spokesman, but Steve Baker, very interested to get your thoughts. Former Conservative Government Minister there, Steve Baker. Your response to what he had to say, Sam?
Listening to Steve, I just thought there's an enormous amount of common sense from you.
He's always been sane.
He has always been
on the right side of every argument.
He has very often been sane, but I just wish that some of this common sense had been on a bit more display in the last, especially the latter part of the Tory government we just suffered for
that's the thing.
years.
And it's always interesting. I used to phrase sane about people. People think, well, that's a bit rude. Things I'm saying. I genuinely think so many politicians spout such nonsense that I'll take, like, whether it's on trans or whether it's on net zero or migration. Genuinely, sanity is just my bare minimum now. Just bare minimum. On which note, I've got to read you some breaking news this morning. This is beautiful. This is Jeremy Corbyn's got a new party along with Zara Sultana, although they couldn't really agree over what it was called, whether it had a name at all, but it's called Your Party so far. That seems to have taken off, but I mean, it's a terrible name for a party. They're already split for policy. This is on trans issues. It's brilliant. I love this. And you know this is because it's always going to be, because it's basically the Gaza party and then it's the woke progressive party.
But which one of these is madder of the two?
Well, exactly. But Adnan Hussein, who's going to become one of the group's 6 MPs, said last week that trans women are not biologically women, because, I mean, statement of fact, right? But Zara Sultana is properly mad. I'm sorry, when I talk about the senator, properly lefty mad. She declared she would, quote, always speak in support of the rights of trans people and insisted bigotry has no place in the new party. But basically, I mean, they've got their founding conference in the autumn, and the Independent Alliance will be, as part of basically the Gaza MPs who are behind Corbyn. They're going to be folded into new organisation. But basically, this Adnan Hussein is saying women's rights and safe spaces should not be encroached upon. We can have safe third places. Places would be an alternative option. But she is saying, Zara Sultana is saying, no. Trans rights are, human rights, and basic men who claim they're women are women. This is up there with Queers for Palestine. This is absolutely beautiful.
But what women's rights? Adnan Hussein supports regimes around the world, and I dare say, I suspect he supports organisations in the UK that have scant regard for women's rights. And I'm shocked. They do have women's spaces, but they're normally round the back. I'm not being pejorative here. In a number of British mosques, women are basically sent round the back. They have much inferior services. They're not allowed to mix with the men. This is the kind of guy that supported this. Others of there have been going out supporting the cousin marriage and all sorts of stuff. This is toxic, awful ideas. The only thing that gives me any satisfaction about it all is it's going to terribly, terribly split the Labour vote, and it might just allow a sane government.
That's the big worry, wasn't it? Reform split the right-wing vote in this country, and then Labour get in again with a big majority. That could happen. But actually, we're looking at Corbyn's new party, looking at taking, and he and Zara Sultana will fall out within 2 months. Absolutely, 100%. That'll all be over. The egos are too big on this, and they could take as many as 10% of votes, not just 10% of the Labour vote, 10% of votes. We are looking at an absolute annihilation of Labour at that point.
The funniest thing is that Keir Starmer thought, I've got a brilliant wheeze, I'll fix the vote next time round by giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote.
Genius.
Now they're all going to vote for Corbyn's lot and Farage. Couldn't make it up.
I know. Isn't democracy wonderful? Isn't it a wonderful, brilliant thing? We're going to take a quick break, then I'm going to get to your calls. I know Paul wants to get in touch to reacting to something Steve Baker said. And Grace wants to talk about the Archbishop as well, putting his tuppence worth into politics. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. I'll get some text messages as well on the Yvette Cooper, basically rearranging the deck chairs on the migrant story Titanic. That's all coming up next. This is Talk.
for media.
Yeah, so screen time is a massive sort of part of teenagers nowadays since, like I said, lockdown. A lot of people in my class have long screen times, 10 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, and it's certainly on the rise, and it's something that we need to be doing more about. The anxiety side of things, I don't necessarily believe that anxiety has risen. I think maybe laziness has risen, and a lot of people use that as an excuse to anxiety as an excuse to not do stuff, but certainly screen time is a massive problem.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk Till 28 is the time. Let's go straight to your texts and your tweets coming in thick and fast about the government's latest announcement, nonsense on migration policy, tackling, 0.0001% of the problem. And Starmer accusing Nigel Farage of scaremongering over China migrants. Will says, here's a crazy thought. Why don't we pause all immigration till we solve the issues we have already? Might be onto something there, Will. Dave says scaremongering is whipping up an irrational fear. The public have a very rational fear backed up by crime statistics. Gemma says shouldn't have taken almost civil war to make Starmer do what the UK citizens want. Trust me, Starmer is not going to do what the UK citizens want. Steve says, and again, lawyers will look into this and create new loopholes to exploit these asylum seekers bringing their families in. The whole system needs to be changed. The UK could be compassionate, but what if that compassion is exploited? Steve, I wrote a whole article for The Sun about this on Friday, asking how many people are we going to let in? Because there's basically probably about 3 billion people on this planet that, according to Labour Party policy and the bleeding hearters and the archbishops, we should allow into this country. I mean, I haven't got a big enough spare room. Henry says another pathetic attempt. Farage is not scaremongering. He's pointed out a reality which Cooper just ignores. And Isla says scaremongering. Starmer is so out of touch with ordinary folk. Let's go straight to the lines. Paul is on the line in Lancashire. A good afternoon to you, Paul. What do you want to say?
Good afternoon, Julia.
Afternoon.
First time speaking to you. Afternoon. I'm an avid listener, but I had to pull over and stop. Yeah, Steve Baker, just a quick point. Steve Baker might be a very nice person, but as an avid Tory for 30 odd years since I voted Labour in my early teens, what I remember is that back to the night when Boris was in, he had an 80-seat majority and he got a mandate from the public to do something about immigration. Yep. I'm not being racist or anything. Now, all as the Tories did, over 55% of them put blocks in civil courts action to try and overturn these things. Dominic Grieve et al., they all went against this.
But that was in 2019. That was before he got the majority.
I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, this is for future Tories who think they're going to go back. Yeah. They're going to be the same again. There will never be a party for immigration like Reform are. Unfortunately, I'm not saying
it's not. It's basically it's not in their blood. But I have to say, most Tories I know were flabbergasted by the legal migration numbers, the visas. 1.2 million visas for people to arrive. 1.2 million people arriving on legal visas, and that was under the points-based system that everyone had voted for. But we wouldn't. The plan wasn't to let in the entire world on a points-based visa. That was something that under Boris Johnson that happened without us being told. We only found out a year and a half later.
Absolutely. When Theresa May was the worst. I mean, she went against. Well, yeah, and they've all been the same. And unfortunately, they're all coming back. I mean, the Tories are saying, vote for us, we'll do it. But I've got no confidence that they will.
I think that's the reason why a lot of people...
There's a lot of wets in them.
Yeah, again, lots of people feel that way. I know that's something Sam Armstrong is doing his best to tackle, can I say. Paul, appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Let's go to Grace, who is in London. And Grace, you wanted to talk about archbishops putting their tuppence worth in politics.
Yeah, I've not been a particular fan of Cottrell. I have some theological disagreements with him, and I'm very well aware that the whole concept of belief in God probably seems completely mad to lots of people. I used to think that slightly growing up, but came to find that there was rational reasoning that convinced me personally.
And you're a Christian, yeah.
Yeah, and I later read a lot of historical detail about the resurrection, which made me feel that though I can't get my head around it, I do actually believe it. And I really would love it if the bishops would spend more time talking about that, because if it is the case, and I know it sounds bad, but if it is the case that Jesus offers us eternal life, then that's really more significant than anything political. So we do need to hear more about that from the archbishops.
That's kind of their job, yeah.
Yeah. Having said that, I do think that, particularly given the importance of free speech, that Stephen Cottrell talking about this when doing an interview on a news channel is not in itself a particular problem. He's not really directly influencing policy. He's kind of right, I'm afraid, that Farage's policies are not going to solve the underlying issues. The reality is that our world is very, very unjust. And I know it sounds really Pollyanna-ish, but long term, our politicians need to think about ways of dealing with some of those injustices, because it's inevitable that people will want to move around.
Well, just because, but they might want to do whatever they want to do, but we don't have to let them into this country. But why is it our job to deal with anyone on the other side of the world in a country not lots of us don't even know, couldn't place on a map? Why is it our job to deal with them? Isn't it the job of the people of their own country to deal with that?
No, from a Christian perspective, I really believe, and other Christians believe, and Jesus makes the point that people from different places are our neighbours, and we should care about them as human beings.
But wait a minute, you can care about someone, and you can send foreign aid, or you can, much better actually, trade with countries and not put trade barriers up like we do, and indeed the EU in particular does to these countries. You can and help them with things like democracy and the rule of law, which are key parts of countries doing well. You can do that, but that doesn't mean you have to have them come and live in your country.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they should all come and live in this country.
So in what way is Nigel Farage's policy wrong then?
I think that, as Stephen Cottrell said, it's not really addressing the underlying issue.
But it is. It's addressing the underlying issue for British people.
Well, yes, but like I said, if you send people back, people will still want to come. And I'm concerned about human beings more broadly. I think it would be good for there to be a much more nuanced system, because plainly some people are coming should not be, and some people do have a good case. So there needs to be a better way of sorting that out.
I would like every country in the world to be somewhere where people could make their own life and live in freedom and safety. But then we're told we're being colonial by doing that, and we're interfering. I mean, I think we can't have it. We can't have it both ways. But Grace, really interesting call. Really, really interesting. Thank you so much for making those points. Right, I'm just going to get to something that's very much about helping people, particularly, of course, if you are an Oasis fan. We're back to Oasis tickets, folks. Our biggest competition to date is now live, and we are giving you the chance to win a whopping £25,000 plus Oasis tickets. The two lucky winners will win a pair of Oasis tickets when they return to Wembley on the 27th of September. I'd like to point out 25k won't even buy you two decent tickets Oasis anymore. Have you seen the price of the reselling there? Plus, that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we're giving one listener the chance to win that huge, 25 grand. For all the details on how to enter this amazing competition, listen up right now.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 338. All entries must be received by the 19th of September at 9 a.m. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Good luck with that, and you're welcome to take me along with you. 12:36 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Connie Shaw from the Free Speech Union about how a mum who simply said a statement of fact that trans women are not women had her son, disabled son, banned from a summer camp. Yes, really. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. I very much appreciate you joining me. Sam Armstrong still here and delighted to be joined now by the Free Speech Union's External Affairs Officer, Connie Shaw. Very good afternoon to you. I still remember speaking to you the very first time when you were facing issues and Free Speech Union helped you out. It's great that you're now part of the FSU. I'm a member as well. A couple of things I want to talk to you about, but this one, I've just been, just giving a vague summary about, a mum of a disabled child trying to get her kid into a summer camp. And basically, she and the child, the disabled child, banned from summer camp for the heinous crime of, knowing biological fact. Tell us who this was and tell us what happened.
So this is a charity called Over the Wall that organises these trips for severely disabled children and their parents. And at the end of last year, the mother of this 8-year-old boy, who up until recently was being fed 100% through a tube, in the form that she had to fill out for him, one of the questions was, what's your child's pronouns? And instead of going along with this religious ritual that's inflicted on nearly every person that engages with any public organisation these days, she just wrote seriously, ? And sent the form back.
I mean, I got asked to fill out preferred pronouns and gender and like all the different options. And I complain. Every time I see those forms, I formally complain. I say, no, I will stop this nonsense. So she didn't say, F off or anything like that. She simply just wrote seriously because it was a boy.
Yeah, an 8-year-old boy.
So his name was then on the form, and presumably also is he a boy or a girl, or male, female. So of course his pronouns are he and him.
Well, you'd think so, but then multiple months later, she got a call from one of the directors of the company, and she was asked to explain herself as to what she meant.
Explain herself.
And that phone call, she was honest, and she said, no, I don't engage with this sort of stuff. I don't believe in this ideology, and I believe that there are two sexes, and you can't change sex. The phone call ended, and moments later, she got an email saying that she and her son were not allowed to come on this trip because her views do not align with the inclusive policies of this charity. And what's so funny about this is that all of their internal comms, which we have seen through a subject access request, that many of these organisations don't realise how much data they have to give over to you that they have. All of it say that it is due to her views not aligning with their policies, but now it's gone public and the charity was contacted for comment by the Telegraph. They said, no, it wasn't about her views, it was because she was verbally aggressive on the phone, which is a very common line.
But this is not mentioned in any of the internal emails.
None of the internal emails.
This woman became aggressive and we just didn't feel she was right. Which would be an interesting, a fair reason to say, look, I'm not sure this is the right person to come on this trip. But I love that they're inclusive, but not inclusive of a woman, a mother with the views which are the vast majority of population's views, and also, I know it's a small point, biologically factual, but also not inclusive of her son.
Yes.
An 8-year-old, very severely disabled kid that was otherwise have been able to benefit from, obviously, I would like to think is a good charity. I would now no longer, that sort of charity think, that's a charity worth giving money to. Well, I wouldn't anymore.
Well, not only does it raise questions about their wider sort of, like you say, inclusivity policies, they're so inclusive that they've managed to ban severely disabled child from the opportunity of making friends. But this charity is funded by BBC Children in Need.
Of course it is.
Of course, Rosie Millard, the ex-chair of BBC Children in Need, she was, as she says, thrown under the bus when she questioned LGBT Youth Scotland, the funding of them, when they were problematic and had serious safeguarding issues. But also, in general, these are children who need round-the-clock care. Yeah. Having single-sex care is very important. So if they're this extreme on pronouns, what happens when a mother says, I don't want any man looking after my daughter when she needs to be washed?
Which is a completely reasonable thing to be concerned about. But this is the thing. It is a simple matter of fact that you can't change sex. The likes of Professor Robert Winston, who knows a bit about these things, made these statements on Question Time, of course, then blackballed by the BBC. We had Maya Forstatter of Sex Matters. She had a case that went all the way up to the top court, where the ruling was, and it does annoy me, it is a protected belief, philosophical belief, that you cannot change sex and that there's a woman and a man and men can't become women and vice versa. I mean, it annoys me that that's a belief. It's not a belief, it's a simple matter of factual truth. But nevertheless, this has been the law for quite some time. We've then had the Supreme Court ruling last April, making it very clear that whether it's sex, it is biological sex, that is the only thing that matters. So none of this stuff should be coming up, but it keeps all coming up, whether it's changing rooms in the NHS for nurses or whether it's someone asking for pronouns and the like. But people are being penalised and punished for saying, no, I would rather go along with fact, science and the law.
And I must add, Julia, that in their statement to the Telegraph, where they start off by saying, oh, it wasn't actually about her views, it was because she was apparently verbally aggressive on the phone, they end the statement by saying, also, our decision was influenced by the fact that there's a trans child on this trip, so we thought we didn't want to cause any tension. So it's not about your views, but also it is about your views.
Okay,
That's how
she needs to sue them for libel. I mean, absolutely. If you've been accused falsely of being verbally abusive and you haven't, and there's no evidence that you have been, she should absolutely do that. I'll help crowdsource that one. But for me, there is no such thing as a trans child. If you've got severely disabled children, and that someone has, I mean, they ain't come up with this idea in their own head. They've been basically told, oh, well, actually what your issue is, and we've seen this with lots of severely mentally ill children, with children who've got severe learning difficulties, like autism and the like, children who've been sexually abused, being told, or children who are just simply gay, and they've got parents who won't accept that, being told that actually the problem they've got is actually the fact they're born in the wrong body. How dare someone tell a severely disabled child that? How dare they?
I know, it's really concerning, and to know that, like you say, that's something I actually hadn't considered, the fact that these kids are so disabled. How on earth has this child been, groomed into this ideology?
Because it is grooming. And in terms of where, I mean, the Free Speech Union is involved in this, what are they doing and what's going to happen, do you think?
Well, the mother isn't minded at the moment to take legal action because she wants to protect the privacy of her and her child, which is even more devastating about this whole situation because her child is so vulnerable. And this is another example of ideology being put in front of the most vulnerable children who need the most suitable care. And I cannot dread to think what goes on in these camps if they are this extreme on this issue. But our single biggest category of cases, 20% of all of our cases are to do with transgender ideology and pronouns. So it's not a surprise
it's still
to anyone
going on.
At the FSU.
And again, you remember these people who have decided to not let an 8-year-old disabled boy come on this trip because the mother expressed factual views that were expressed by the majority of the population of this country and by the law. They think they're the nice people.
I know.
That's the bit that always gets me. They think they're the nice people. Can I also ask you another story? This is it. Apparently we have these visas called global talent visas, and you'd be thinking, yeah, let's say, so some big pop stars, some big names in acting, that you want them to be able to travel easily. We want them to be in their, their film roles, and we can make a load of money. Lots of people making money in the film industry, and let's face it, our popular culture is a huge export for this country. And there might be some other sort of, major artists, whether they are, I would have thought, musicians or, in a symphony orchestra or painters. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get the best of the brightest coming to this country. Well, apparently, Turkish transgender drag queens are some of those who've been included on special visas for global talent. You get a 5-year visa to come here, and you get to bring your family, and because they've claimed artist merit, and they're even endorsed by the Arts Council. Is there a shortage of Turkish transgender drag queens in this country that we needed to fill? I don't know.
There may be a shortage of Turkish transgender drag queens, but there certainly isn't a shortage of drag queens, and that's the talent that they're supposedly bringing. I completely disagree with drag. I think it's completely offensive.
It's woman face,
I do think it's woman face.
Blackface not acceptable.
I completely support people's right to do it, but we certainly don't have a shortage. And I think the last thing we need to be doing is importing more fascistic men into this country who want to undermine women's rights, because that's what this is. And I think people don't realise. I speak to my mum about this, and she said, "But drag's just a bit of fun." It's like, no, mum.
I used to think it was fun, and I'm less and less of that.
Because if you look at what these people are saying, it's mocking women, but it's also completely wrapped up in trans ideology, and that is undermining women's rights. We have enough of it going on in this country.
We don't need to import
any more of it.
Absolutely fascinating. Also, I can't imagine they could think, oh, I can't go back to Turkey because, look, Sam Armstrong's been with us. And I know you do a lot of work with the Conservative Party. You're an independent commentator, but you also do a lot of work at the Free Speech Union. Where do you stand on this?
Well, look, I'll tell you this, you're never going to get migration down to the level that we want in this country if you're reserving places for Turkish drag queens. I think
that's a fair summary of the situation.
Look, we just want you to make the promises you've made. You say you can't do it, it's too tough, but you're letting in Turkish drag queens.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the other one?
How do we cut the numbers? Well, here's an easy one. Are they also astrophysicists and engineers and world famous brain surgeons? Then maybe that'd be fine. Otherwise, I'm going to vote no. 12:48 time. Huge thanks to Connie Shaw for joining us. Up next, we're going to be talking to award-winning teacher Stephen James about kids going back to school, and the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson saying parents need to do more to get their kids in school and to deal with their behaviour. Well, yeah, haven't some of us been saying that for years? This is Talk.
Yeah, so screen time is a massive sort of part of teenagers nowadays since, like I said, lockdown. A lot of people in my class have long screen times, 10 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, and it's certainly on the rise, and it's something that we need to be doing more about. The anxiety side of things, I don't necessarily believe that anxiety has risen. I think maybe laziness has risen, and a lot of people use that as an excuse to anxiety as an excuse to not do stuff, but certainly screen time is a massive problem.
On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning. No, good afternoon. Sorry, 12:52 is the time. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Ian Collins will be in just a couple of moments. Tell us what's on his show. First up, though, it's back to school this week. Some kids are already back to school today, or we've got those inset days that teachers somehow never managed to do the week before. But there we are. Lots of parents desperate to get their kids back to school. Some rather worried about the behaviour, and some just not bothering to send their kids to school at all. And yet, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has warned, actually, that kids who miss the start of term are far more likely to miss far more school, and far too many kids happened before lockdown, but certainly happened since, when kids were basically banned from school. Most of them are actually attending enough of the school year. Let's talk to Stephen James, an award-winning teacher, about this. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. This is a really big issue, isn't it? I can remember having, arguments with parents who say, "Oh, I'm going to take my kid out for a school holiday, during term time, a holiday, because we can get the flights for half the price." And then people be upset about kids losing a week of schooling, which of course impacts other kids. Teachers have to go back and teach that topic again, etc. But now we've got kids who just don't turn up to school for huge amounts of the year, and the parents know about it. What's going on?
Yeah, and I actually think a lot of what's going on is people aren't valuing school and education and what it can do.
The schools and the government did during lockdown, so they're probably right to think that, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I can talk with some authority about this. I mean, when I grew up, I was on free school meals. I was one of those white working class boys, and it took such extra effort for me to be able to get on in life. I had to stay behind school to actually go to the library, to have a quiet place to learn, and somewhere where I could study. But I was singularly focused on getting out of that situation I was in. And that's because I had seen from cousins and things like that who had done well in life.
There was an option. But the key thing about that is going to school. And we know that attending every day is absolutely crucial. But we have now hundreds of thousands of children who don't attend every day.
But it's about being aspirational. It's about what do you want to do when you leave the education system.
But a lot of kids don't think about that. It's not the job of a 6-year-old to decide whether to go to school or not and have a plan to be a doctor. It's the job of the parents. What's going on with the parents?
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about older children and A-levels, that they can make their own decisions. But younger children, you're absolutely right. And you know, when you're thinking about that kind of group of people and parents in particular, and you know, I will correct the Education Secretary on what she's saying about working class children, because actually I think it's the non-working class families that a lot of this kind of falls into as well. It's not your families where they're getting up early, going to work every morning, setting good examples to their children, and then dropping off the children on the way as well. It's those families that are, you know, thinking, do you know what, I'm just going to sit at home and watch absolute nonsense on TV all day because it's the easy option. I don't have to get out my pajamas.
Here's the thing I don't get. Why do they want their kids there when they're doing it? Genuinely, it's like, if you're going to have a lazy day, wouldn't you rather do it without your 8-year-old there or your 13-year-old there? But this is the thing. When the Prime Minister says that, you know, actually school's not the most important thing, and that's not a priority for you for best part of a year and a half, 2020, 2021, not a surprise. Lots of parents have gone, well, fair enough, then it isn't. People have got into the habit of not going to school. A lot of kids have got into that habit. But at the end of the day, you need to go to school to get on in life, but you also need to go to school to understand how working life works. This is the reason why we've got loads of youngsters who turn up and think that going to work on a Monday morning's optional.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But let's not forget about those parents as well who are actually adding value at home as well. So you have some who are doing home learning as well.
No, because part of school isn't just what you learn. Part of school is mucking in, it's making friends, it's doing what you're told, it's learning to work. I don't approve of home learning at all.
And that's your right, absolutely. But I would also say that the parents' rights trump the state's rights, and also, dare I say, trump your views as well.
I know we have those parents' rights, and we have to have them. I'm fundamentally of the view anyone who's willing to wants to teach their children at home should not be allowed to.
I wouldn't want to do it.
Exactly. But can I ask you just finally, can we talk about behaviour? Because the Education Secretary, parents need to do more to tackle children's bad behaviour. One of the biggest reasons why teachers say they leave the profession, one of them is the bureaucracy and all the paperwork, and the other really number one key reason is the behaviour of the children. What are we going to do about it?
Well, we need to back our teachers ultimately. You know, when they are deciding that there needs to be consequences for poor behaviour, we need to back teachers up. And that means the parents need to back them up, firstly, not undermine them in front of children and say, well, I disagree with my child getting this detention or punishment. And also the state needs to back them up as well. And if they are, you know, running a school with well-disciplined children, those children will naturally do well because their learning isn't being distracted by children who are misbehaving, calling out, arriving to lessons late, looking for a pen, all those sorts of things. Low-level disruption is the biggest thing in my view that is disrupting children's education.
It's such an issue, isn't it? And that's why a lot of teachers actually often be quite happy when some of these kids aren't there because they're part of the disruption, but it's not a solution for those kids' lives. Stephen James, a Warburton teacher, thank you so much. Apologies it was so short and sweet, but Sam Armstrong, I mean, one of my problems I've often had is that so many people making decisions about schools are people who went to grammar schools or private schools. At least Bridget Phillipson actually just went to a bog standard comp like I did, and if you didn't go to a bog standard comp, you don't understand how much disruption there is in a classroom.
Yeah, the one thing I want more than anything, though, is bad parents. Parents whose kids don't turn up or act out to face a little bit of shame themselves for
100%.
it. They need to be known at the school gate.
They are known.
Whose kid it is that day in, day out is disrupting every other kid's education, is stealing the chance from them to go and have a
but then you had Tony Blair. They basically, under him, they decided to ban. They basically wanted to ban kids being expelled, and only someone who'd gone to a private school would have done that because you're basically sacrificing 29 kids' education for one child, and that's the reality. It's parents' job. If your kid can't behave at school, if you get told off at school, you should expect a double punishment when you get home. It's simple as that. Sam Armstrong, always great to have you on the show. Fantastic input as always. Ian Collins, I'm sure is here right now. Have your kids gone to? Are they going to school this week?
Wednesday, secondary school. Do you know what I found out at the weekend? So the flurry of emails,